What is going on, everyone? Greetings, greetings, greetings. Welcome to the ASTROLABE. It is Tuesday, January 14th. Lots of things are happening. Many conversations are being had. There are news events, there is discourse, and I am here to tell you exactly what to think about all of these things. That's my job. My fellow Astrolabians, you guys have showed up here faithfully, loyally, every single day, so I can tell you what to think. And I hold this responsibility, this sacred responsibility, with great honor. I'm very honored that you have placed your trust in me, that you have outsourced all of your critical reasoning capacity to me and allowed me to guide your minds. It's a great honor. Do me a favor, and in return, hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel. Follow me on Twitter at RealKingPilled. I'm also streaming on X there. And you can join the Kingpilled Discord, kingpilled.com. And you can also send a super chat if you like what you're hearing, or if you don't like what you're hearing but you want me to keep doing it, then send me a super chat. Or there's a couple other ways in the description. Links in the description. There's a Cash App. There's a buymeacoffee.com. You can throw a little coin my way. You can also subscribe to the Kingpilled Substack if you would like. It is free for now, but that's another way that if you're on there and you want to support what I'm doing, then the Kingpilled Substack. That's where I will post all of the links for all of this. And let me tell you, this is a labor of love. I see how many of you click those links. There's just a few of you, but for your sake, I'll keep doing it. It takes a while. I go through a lot of links. I got to put all those links in there. It takes a very long time, but I'll keep doing it for you guys because I am a man of the people. So kingpilled.com is the place to be. Allow Google Chrome to find devices on local networks. Don't allow. Yes, so you can thank me with a subscription there. You can do a paid subscription or a free one. Either one's fine. I just want to make sure you guys have that option to you. I used to do it on Twitter. I'd tweet out a thread, and it was at least as much work, and it was just bogging down all of my Twitter timeline with an endless chain of links. So I decided to stop doing that and started doing it on Substack, which doubles as a way of getting the podcast uploaded to all the podcatchers for those of you who want to consume it on demand in audio format. So it is also there on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and whatever other podcatchers you use. If you are listening over there, then last bit of housekeeping, please make sure you're subscribed to the show and leave me a 5-star rating and review. Let me know what you think of it. If you hate it, tell me. If you think I'm wrong, tell me. I'm not going to change my mind, but I'm happy to hear you. I'm happy to hear your protests. All right. Let's get on into this because this is probably going to be a bit of a long show. I'm starting late because I was having a long conversation with Cooper this afternoon discussing some of the things I'm going to discuss today, and it's very useful. I haven't had a nice long conversation with him in a while, but he had a late work day because he got drowned in snow up there, and he's out driving his truck around the countryside. And I spent a long time thinking about exactly what I wanted to say on in particular the Bootstraps discourse. This is, if you're not on Twitter, you're probably not aware of what's going on, but that's part of the job of my show here is to inform you what different narrative points are going around, what people are saying. Because Twitter is where it's the media now. That's where the narrative is happening. It's the public square, so to speak. And anybody who's not there following it, you by default you're going to be days at least behind the happenings. And many happenings are emerging out of the happenings on Twitter. The nothing ever happens bros are eternally BTFO. So part of the job of the Astrolabe here is to keep you guys looped in on what's going on Twitter. And so the Bootstraps discourse has taken over the timeline today. And as usual, I am a radical, squishy lib centrist. And so I'm going to ruffle some feathers. I probably, given the constituency of the audience, is probably only going to be feathers ruffling in one direction, but potentially I could cross the spectrum with it. So yeah, my wife says, pray for the right words for Matt. Yeah, do me a solid and make sure that I am able to well communicate the thoughts that are on my mind. I've got a lot of other people's thoughts that I'm going to share and jump off of. But before we get to all that, got a few updates on some other stories we've talked about. Got the big main story here is Trump BTFOing Bibi. We'll get to that one here in a little bit. Pete Hegseth had his his grilling in front of the Senate. I got some clips from that. And what was the other thing I put in here? GUNDO. We're going to talk about the GUNDO boys. I told you I would, and the universe responds. I said I need to start talking about the GUNDO boys some more. And here we go. We get 2 GUNDO boy interviews dropping on the same day. So I'm going to share those with you guys, and we're going to talk about FanDuel Americans. I had to put FanDuel America in the title because I just made the title too long. I only get 100 characters, so I had to knock off the end of it. FanDuel America, but it's FanDuel Americans. So we will get into that. But first of all, of course, it is the ASTROLABE, and we have to start off with Slop. And I've got a couple of good ones here. This first one, we get to exult in someone else's misfortune. The editing of this one, this is a very common type of video, but the editing in this one just really, really got me. This is a nice little evolution on the typical appearance of these types of, I don't know, you'd call it like a TikTok challenge or something like that. The editing on this one, it just takes it to the next level.
You know, I found out the hard way the last time that I tried this.
Oh, not again!
And I haven't seen this done with any other sodas before. And I just don't think it's going to be as crazy.
Not again! Oh, not again!
You know.
Oh man, these unsung heroes, the anonymous Slop editors, who I have no idea who produced this. I highly doubt that No Context shitposting actually produced this. They stole it from someone. That someone didn't care enough or wasn't smart enough to ensure that their name would travel around with the clip. So this is just one of these great ones. It just gets tossed off into the ether, and no one will ever claim responsibility for it. But these people deserve their credit. I'm so glad that we have these brilliant artists, our unsung heroes, the anonymous Slop creators. And then this one here, I just finished listening to Theo Vaughn on Joe Rogan. They did they sat down for 4 hours and recorded, but the first half was posted on one half was posted on Theo's channel and one half was posted on Joe's channel. And so I sat and listened to the whole thing, and it's just, their dynamic is so much fun to watch. Theo is just a pure-hearted, wonderful soul. And he obviously looks up to Joe, and he has that humor that just tickles Joe. So there's so many. I mean, you would get drunk if you tried to if you took a drink every time Joe misses a joke. It just like flies right over his head. But Theo's a golden retriever. That's exactly what he is. He's such a great person. But this is the top 5 Theo Vaughn funniest moments, and these are some genuinely good ones. In that conversation, the 2-part conversation he had with Joe, the times when they did the smelling salts had me laying on the ground laughing. The way that Theo reacted to it the first time, like the dude just jams his nose down inside that bottle and just hits it hard. You could tell that he has a very well-traveled nose. He just jammed his nose in it, and then the first thing he does is immediately start checking his pulse. The dude thought he was dying. Very strongly recommend you guys go watch those if you want some good, just kind of lighthearted entertainment. But this one, top 5 Theo Vaughn funniest moments.
Do you want to wear headphones or no?
Oh yeah, you want to put them on? I didn't see you had yours on.
I feel like I'm alone here in headphone land.
Yeah, it is weird, huh?
Now you're back.
It's like when you put a condom on and then the other person's just still looking at their phone. You're like, oh, this is weird. And the person, I mean, is a woman too.
Jesus Christ, you gotta tell everybody, huh?
Well, I'm just saying, bro. I'm just saying.
I'm your dad. I'm your son.
Okay. Hey, Dad.
Bubby. No, you have to.
Do it. Sorry, just do it like me.
I don't know. Wait, you don't have to have an Asian accent.
I don't know what. I don't know what country we're in.
No.
We just had a guy come in here and drop the N-word, man. We cannot be laughing about this shit right now.
Oh, I don't think that shit's funny at all. What I do is if I really need to get it out, I write it down.
What the fuck?
Dude, when I was growing up, we couldn't even get porn. We had to get this dude Nick on Friday would draw us a picture of some pussy, you know, with a crotch for the weekend. $4 to this dude Nick.
$4 for drawings?
Bro, you'd pay $8. And he had a nice fucking thing, bro.
Also, I'm drinking like Monster Energy drinks sometimes, which are like piss magnets.
Yeah.
They're delicious, but they make you want to pee.
Make you want to beat your wife too, dude. I've seen a lot of dudes drinking Monster that you know they're going home to punch.
Jesus. I don't know if the Monster is the cause of it.
Isaac Wednesday saw this on TikTok before it made it to Astrolabe Award. That's a very important award. There are a few of you who it seems regularly get that. That's always funny when I'll save a clip. I'm like, oh, I'm going to do this on the show today, and then in the King Pill Discord or on Twitter, everyone starts talking about it, and I'm like, well, I saw it first. Oh man, $5 or five. I don't know what this is. 5 Brazilian reals from CG Constantine. He says, today I discovered that civilizational capital does indeed apply to everything, not just buildings. The lighters of 1900s and 1950s are fascinating. Lighters? Are you talking like cigarette lighters? I would like to know what you're referring to. I haven't seen. Maybe this is something that was being discussed in the group chat, and I haven't spent a lot of time in there today. But if you've got something to send on that subject, you've piqued my interest, Mr. Constantine. One of the most loyal Astrolabians. All right. We got a quick update on a couple recent stories. First one is, I think this might be a first. Might be the first time we've ever had an update on Slop. I talked about this. I played this clip for you guys yesterday. This woman has an elite level understanding of male psychology. Boiling it down, men or women, send your men on quests. Men love quests. And Josh Scorcher here has a very valid update. He says, great advice, but I'd like to add a small caveat. Many men don't like to be interrupted when they're already working on a task, so don't be surprised if you get, quest, I'm already on a quest. And this is a very good point. So I feel for you, ladies. Maybe we're a little more complicated than we initially let on. You do have to, in your determination of sending us on quests, you do have to ascertain whether or not we are currently engaged on a quest. And in fact, many of us, I would say, are currently engaged at any given moment, are currently engaged in many quests simultaneously. We have quest ADHD. Death says, my quest log is full. You gotta update the log every so often. So this is a very important caveat, and I'm grateful to Kate for bringing this to my attention. And then I got an update on something else, on a couple other stories here in just a minute. But before I get to those, some serious news. The most recent data for December of 2024 is out. The U.S. government had total revenue, taxes, fees, and tariffs of $454 billion. So for the month of December, the U.S. government had total revenue of $454 billion. The U.S. government paid $140 billion on interest on the national debt. So 31% of all government revenue was consumed by interest payments on the debt. But it's actually worse than that. The money, revenue, and payments for things like Social Security push up the revenue number, but it's all out the door to recipients right away. So if you ignore the Social Security and unemployment insurance money, the U.S. government had $317 billion in revenue and paid $140 billion in interest on the national debt. About 44% of all revenue went to interest. And they included the table here. This is from Wall Street Mavs on Twitter, at Wall Street Mav. They included the table here if you want to go to the King Pilled Substack later on, or you're listening on the podcast and you want to go check the links in the description. There'll be a link to this if you want to peruse through the table yourself. But the shit's getting real. Now, I'll note that Trump today, I didn't have a link for this, but Trump today announced that he is going to be creating the ERS. What is the ERS? Well, the IRS is the Internal Revenue Service. Trump will be creating an External Revenue Service. This External Revenue Service will be responsible for going after external parties, external to the United States, to ensure that they're paying their required amounts in tariffs and whatever other payments they're obligated to. I'll also throw into this a point that I think kind of flew under the radar. I didn't see a lot of people talking about it, but Trump tweeted or I think he truthed a couple of days ago, maybe 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago, that if Europe does not make up their trade deficit with the United States through, I think he said, massive or large-scale purchases of American oil and gas, then he will be tariffing them. And this, maybe Trump just says so much shit now that people are just kind of like, Trump just said some more stuff. But the incoming president just told Europe, if you're not buying substantial amounts of American energy, you are going to get tariffed. If you don't understand the complete significance of that, then do a little Googling around the Marshall Plan. And you may understand that this is a dramatic change. The incoming Trump administration is a singular generation, or a single administration, a singular administration with respect to its posture toward Europe. There's a lot of different, there's a bunch of different data points feeding into this conclusion, but it seems very clear that this incoming administration recognizes that this default posture of, the European countries are just our allies, and that means we suborn our entire national identity to them and their crazy political agendas, is not helpful. It's not good for us. We cannot continue living like this. So the notion that Europe is going to be placed on, and I think this plays into, we'll get into this a little bit here with the talk about the Gaza peace deal that's being negotiated right now, but the Israel-Gaza war and the Ukraine war are the same conflict. This is one and the same. This is, Thomas 777 has done a lot of great work on this, talking to Pete Quinones. These are most properly understood as part of the same conflict. Now, if I was the Trump administration, if I imagine the Trump administration as a person, and my goal was to maximize the profitability of the United States and to realign global trade policy to reflect the interests of America, then I would have a very strong incentive in ensuring that Europe does not, that the severed relationship between Europe and Russia is maintained, because I would want Europe, which is basically the only region in the world that is not capable of being energy independent, the broad region. Every other continent, every other broad region is capable of being energy independent to some degree or another. Europe is not. They cannot maintain a first world standard of living and be energy independent. Leaving aside the fact that the whole notion of Europe being a single monolithic region is just Europeans won't even stand for that. These are centuries old blood feuds that don't just go away. But my expectation would be that the Trump administration has a strong incentive to want to see the Ukraine made into effectively like a demilitarized zone that minimizes the hostilities, but ensures that there's a severed relationship between Europe and Russia, so that Europe has to become fully dependent upon the United States, and increasingly dependent upon the United States energy policy. So my expectations for how the Ukraine war, I think it's going to be ended, but I don't think that this is, I don't think that it's going to be, I don't know, like Jeffrey Sachs determining what things are going to look like there. I think that there's probably a lot of appetite within the incoming administration for it to remain sort of a clusterfuck, and to ensure that Russia and Europe remain at loggerheads, to push Europe more into the United States, but inverting the colonial relationship. I'm trying to remember why I got off onto all of that. I don't remember, but as I saw Matt Pearson here says, Europor about to become a reality. Indeed. Absolutely. And here's the thing with, there's one point of rhetoric that I've mentioned in here in the past is Luke Groman talking about how the administration is going to have to drive down the dollar because of how potentially globally catastrophic a strong dollar will be when everyone else is going into recession, and there's a global liquidity crunch. And what he talks about is that if the dollar gets too strong, then all these other nations are going to have to sell off all of their dollars to cover all of their dollar denominated debt. The problem is, and so he says, well, this is going to crash the American economy. The problem is, the American economy is going to be the least dirty shirt in a whole bundle of dirty shirts. Where are they going to go? What else are they going to invest in? What other region is going to be so much better? The United States is uniquely positioned to, despite the incoming crunch, I think it's already started, really. It's been going for a while, but the continuation of this collapse is going to hurt the United States less than anywhere else, even though that shouldn't be taken to mean the United States is going to make it out scot-free. The least stinky poos are. So, personally, this looks bleak. But, I mean, not just personally, this looks bleak to anyone. But personally, I'm quite optimistic that the various different approaches this incoming administration is going to take across a bunch of different angles is going to navigate us out of this. It's just going to hurt like shit while it happens. Continuing here, relatedly, very interesting interview with Jamie Dimon talking to Leslie Stahl. She tries to gotcha on him, and he flips the script. So this is from Vigilant Fox, the 10 shocking stories the media buried today. This was the only one that was really super newsworthy to talk about in this episode. But I welcome you to go and look at the rest of the thread later on. But here is Leslie Stahl and Jamie Dimon.
In terms of advice for the new president, he is inheriting a pretty good economy, despite what people feel, all these metrics that you see. But what about advice to him on some of the policies that he's threatening to do that could hurt the economy? For instance, tariffs. Have you talked to him about tariffs? If you could talk to him right now, what would you say?
I have not spoken about tariffs. I think you should read The Art of the Deal. You know, he's a negotiator. He lays out some very tough things, and sometimes it works. We have to worry more about national security, resiliency, diversified supply chains, and we didn't. And also we should worry more about who it hurt. So while trade's got some enormous benefits, it does hurt that town when the plant closed. We had a thing called trade adjustment assistance, which was supposed to give people retrain, relocation, income assistance if they were hurt by trade. It never quite worked. And so we need to focus on some of those issues. And to me, tariffs are a tool, properly used, that can help get some of those issues resolved. Unfair competition, national security issues. If like any tool, if it's misused, it can do damage too.
But your point is that you think it...
In Jamie Dimon speak, this is a resounding endorsement of Trump. This is full and unwavering support for his entire agenda.
Is a legitimate negotiating tool.
Absolutely. Every country is allowed to make its own unilateral actions. If you look at what China's been doing for years, they do this already.
Threaten and...
No, they put up their own tariffs, their own laws, their own rules, their own regulations. They make a lot of unilateral actions that they think are in their own best interest. So it's not bad for our government to do that. That tool may be a useful tool, properly used.
Not the price of eggs.
No, of course. No,
That's
inflation.
part of it, folded into it.
It was inflation. It was all the money that was given out. If you go to a rural area and you look at all the things that were done, those things like, even EV credits, all this green stuff, they don't look like it benefited them. They still didn't have jobs. Incomes didn't go up. Their schools weren't working. So you got to be very careful when you analyze what happened in our society about why people looked at these and said, this didn't work for me. I'm quite sympathetic. I do a lot of work with my wife in inner cities in New York, and she's been doing work in the Bronx for years. It's hard to look at parts of the Bronx and say, this worked. And this has been going on for 30 years. So it's time that we fix some of these things. And yes, I hope we can do it.
This is... Jamie Dimon almost sounds like a blood and soil nationalist here. This is a thorough repudiation of globalism. Anybody who tries to tell you that Jamie Dimon is some sort of like globalist stooge or something is just ignorant. That's all it is. I'm not going to assume that they're malevolent. I'm just going to say they're ignorant. You have to read these sorts of things through the lens of the class that the statements are coming from. And this is an even stronger statement that he's making here, the way that it's going to be received by the class who this message is directed at. Because this message isn't directed at us. This message is directed at his class, the business, banking, industry elites. That's what this message is directed toward. And this is a thorough repudiation of globalism. No, not just globalism, but the entire fiat standard as it has existed. Jamie Dimon's like, no, this is not going to exist anymore. Jamie Dimon is probably, if you're going to speak in terms of allies here, Jamie Dimon's probably the most important ally that Trump could have. And if Trump has Jamie Dimon's stamp of approval, and these things aren't, I'm speaking in broad terms here. These aren't, I'm not saying Jamie Dimon's going to walk around wearing a MAGA hat. I'm speaking in the terms that these people would be communicating with each other and the way that they're going to be thinking and looking at the world. Jamie Dimon's probably the most useful ally that Trump could possibly have.
With him? Story we all read that you called to congratulate him and he wouldn't take the call?
No, that wasn't true.
It wasn't true?
No, I did not speak to him. I called and left a message with his staff who said they called back and said they gave the president a message and he appreciated it. That's all that happened. I've not spoken to the president for a long time. I have called some of his people and offered my help, which I am going to do as best as I can. So a lot of them can't talk at this point because they're in confirmation process.
But
he made a very nice tweet about me. I thought it was very sweet, that I won't be Secretary of Treasury, appreciates what I've done for my company and my country.
Note that last comment.
But he made a very nice tweet about me. I thought it was very sweet, that I won't be Secretary of Treasury, appreciates what I've done for my company and my country.
Appreciates what I've done for my company and my country. Now, I've had the privilege of getting private messages from some people who have encountered him in private settings, conferences and such where it's, high barrier to entry, speaking more freely. And the things that he's been saying that have been passed on to me are even more. The dude is a patriot. This isn't an act that he's putting on. The dude sees himself as an American patriot. And that's informing the way that he approaches this, which is why you get these little glimpses. You have to parse these sorts of things and apply appropriate handicapping and weighting to them to really understand their significance. But he didn't. It was sort of an odd thing to mention, not just like Trump tweets this thing that everyone took as, oh, this is him sticking his finger in Jamie Dimon's eye. He's like, no, actually, it was I thought it was a very sweet tweet. He mentioned, I'm not going to be Secretary of Treasury, which would be like a demotion for him. The Secretary of the Treasury wants to meet with Jamie Dimon. Jamie Dimon can meet with the Secretary of the Treasury anytime he wants. But he particularly highlights what he thought was sweet was Trump recognizing what he's done for his country because he wants to be seen as someone who has done great things for his country because he sees himself as an American. This is a white pill. Now, I got a nice thread here from Labrador Skeptic, an update on the LA wildfire situation. And this from Finance Lot says potential insurance exposure to Los Angeles fires is $458 billion. The FAIR insurance program is, which is the state insurance program for California that Labrador Skeptic said to tell us a little bit more about here, only has $700 million in cash on hand to pay the claims.
Well, I mean, look, the issue is ultimately going to fall on the federal government, Cheryl. Yep. I mean, it's interesting to see the relationship that Gavin Newsom and President Trump have had in the past. Now they're going to have to work together, and you're going to have to see some kind of federal aid. I'm sure that continuing resolution on March 14th is going to have to include disaster aid. I want to ask our lawmaker guest today about that, Cheryl.
Absolutely, because I want to pick up on something that Ashley was talking about there. FAIR right now, that backup policy of last resort covers about 500,000 homeowners who can't get private coverage, okay? Their exposure right now is at $458 billion. That was in September, potential exposure. That FAIR program only has $700 million cash on hand to pay claims. All right. California is the only state that does not allow private insurance companies, State Farm and Allstate are the two biggest in California, to incorporate the cost of reinsurance into their premiums. And this is why 100,000 Californians lost coverage between 2019 and 2024. You know, State Farm, they dropped 70% of their customers around the Santa Monica Mountains. Just the Santa Monica Mountains, Maria. Yeah. This is what's happening in this state. There is no.
Everyone wants to make this about how all the evil insurance companies, but you hear what she said. California does not allow insurance companies to factor in the cost of reinsurance into their policies. So reinsurance is insurance for an insurance company. The insurance company is going to take the premiums and then invest them and generate a return from them. And they're essentially, it's a bet that there's not going to be a single catastrophe that completely wipes out everything. They're over leveraged, and this is built on top of all of the other over leveraging built into the system, which is completely corrupt. But it's not corrupt because of insurance companies. Insurance companies are doing their best to navigate within the insane strictures that exist for them. So an insurance company is going to take on an insurance policy for the insurance that they're providing, which is an additional cost that they have to bear. But in California, and some other states you mentioned, in California, they're not allowed to factor that cost in to pass it on. So they have like a business input that they just have to eat where California is concerned. So here's Labrador Skeptic's thread. California is a den of thieves that needs to be financially cut off from the rest of America. Sound a bit extreme? That's because you don't know what the scummy bastards in California government have been doing and how the rest of the nation will get screwed to pay for their thievery. The basic issue is that the California government, as a matter of policy, does not allow market-based insurance for all of those extremely expensive homes in fire zones. Naturally, the private insurance companies have been doing everything they can to cancel policies. So they're being mandated to provide policies that are definitionally unfeasible for them. And now California, retroactively, their insurance commissioner says, oh, he's good for the next year. And I think it's retroactive to a certain point. No insurance company is allowed to cancel anyone's policy. So you have to provide a service that you can't afford to pay for. It's illegal to not provide that service, but you also cannot provide it profitably. So these insurance companies, and crucially, these are also our insurance companies in the rest of the nation, have escaped liability, right? Not at all. California really is a group of clever bastards and thieves. The homeowners who can't get market insurance get their insurance through the state FAIR plan. Except, here's the thing. The FAIR plan is not funded by the state of California, but by having the right to impose levies on the insurance companies. FAIR has almost no funding relative to its massive exposure to the LA fires. There's about $2.5 billion in reinsurance, but that'll be a drop in the bucket. Remember, what was the liability of the year? This was in September. Potential exposure is $458 billion. $2.5 billion in reinsurance. Beyond that, the state of California is going to reach and grab the nationwide assets of every insurance company in the nation that does business in California. For people who don't understand insurance, those are actually our assets. They back up all the insurance that we have purchased for our homes in the rest of the nation. So effectively, California is going to steal the insurance assets for the rest of the nation. We haven't gotten to the fun part yet. California strictly limits insurance premium increases, so the insurance companies can't recover their money out of California. But they have to rebuild their assets or they won't be able to pay insurance claims in the rest of the country. So the premiums go up for the entire rest of the country to pay for the California losses. See how that works? This truly is literal theft. California never paid the risk premiums for the enormous risks in the fire zones. They will take the losses from the insurance reserves for the rest of the nation anyway. Of course, they'll also depend on using their political power to get massive funding from the government and Federal Reserve to an extent Western North Carolina can only dream about. Thieves. Vermin. This is... Everyone's talking Bootstraps discourse today, and this sort of thing is looming. This is going to be catastrophic. I honestly, I don't really see a way around the federal government bailing out the insurance companies. Everyone's going to hate it. It could be catastrophic politically for Trump, but I don't really see a way around it right now. Because the alternative is just unfathomable. These are the These are the bills coming due. Previous generations have consumed all the seed corn of future generations. And now we're seeing the results of that. This whole thing right here, this is precisely a case in point example of why people like Jamie Dimon have been so outspoken, relatively speaking, in their support of Trump. Because we cannot continue to live this way. We've spent 80 years, give or take, in this fake, fiat-based, propped-up, artificial growth system that's hyper-leveraged beyond comprehension. Nobody can even fathom what $458 billion is. We talk about these numbers, trillions of dollars. You cannot comprehend how much money this is. I can't comprehend how much money this is. This is an insane amount of money. And when we start talking about the Eurodollar system at large, the sheer volume of currency units in existence and the actual obligations, the claims on those currency units dwarf the actual existing currency units by orders of magnitude. This is not just could collapse the California economy or could collapse the US economy. This is could collapse the global economy, this single event by itself. That's how massive it is. And so within that context, I think the call to bail out the insurance companies is going to be really, really compelling. And it may just be something that is, it's already done. You can't undo it because it's already done. Like, if the alternative is drive off the cliff now or limp along a little further and hope for a Deus Ex Machina, then I have a hard time blaming the people who just decide to kick it along a little further and hope for the Deus Ex Machina. Especially given that there are a number of things on the horizon that I think would, narratively wise, would genuinely constitute a Deus Ex Machina. I haven't listened to this whole conversation yet, but I saw a couple of these clips on this subject. They're very interesting. Michael Schellenberger talking to Tucker about this issue. So Schellenberger is kind of sort of Glenn Greenwald in that sort of vein. Jimmy Dore, like sort of a classical lib, but reasonable. A reasonable, decent guy. Very sincere, very honest. And this is an interesting take he has on religion.
Nietzsche really nailed it, which is that when people stop believing in traditional religions, they unconsciously, develop, they develop a new sense of guilt, a new vision of the apocalypse. They invent a new soul. I mean, people think that there's this thing called gender, which is separate from your body. It's kind of like a soul. My friend Abigail Schreier pointed that out. And so we just end up recreating Christianity, but in a deformed and deranged way. And and the emergent quality of it is this destructive fire. Like, it's actually more powerful because nobody got out there and said, somebody did say, let's let Malibu burn, but that was never like the explicit policy of the government of LA. It's just something that emerges after years of budget cuts, after years of self-hating ideologies like DEI, like climate apocalypse, like the homeless apocalypse. It's just emerges kind of deep within us, from some self-destructive part of us. So for me, if there's a foreign invasion, it came through the human psyche, not from outside of it.
Very insightful take from a lib. I think he's bang on, and I think this is a useful framework to maintain in other domains as well. That the nature of the liberal spirit and the way that it hollows out a people, the way that it turns a nation against itself, actually is better understood as a subversive, insidious, sort of, hidden force than an explicit, overt Machiavellian type of, not even Machiavellian. Machiavellian's more the kind of the subversive type. It's like he says here, the explicit policy was not, let's let Malibu burn. The explicit policy is not, let's drown California in crime and homeless people. The explicit policy is not, let's ensure that we get really, really bad wildfires. There may be individual people who do this math and they're like, oh yeah, I'm going to personally benefit from this, so that's what I want. But by and large, the majority of this is an emergent reality in a polity that is governed by the liberal spirit. It's going to create incentive. It's going to create incentive structures that will develop further incentive structures that will lead to inevitable calamities like this, even if there was no individual person who planned it out and wanted it to happen. And a lot of the effort that winds up being spent on sussing out whose fault it is frankly better spent on just solving the problem. And where solving the problem involves justice for the people who are at fault, then resources can be dedicated to that. But simply trying to ascertain fault and apply a punishment for that isn't sufficient. That's just a small part of the project ahead of us. You guys may be noticing you're getting a little bit of a preview of some of my thoughts on the Bootstrap discourse, but we'll get to that soon. Another clip, this time from Tucker, who has a very interesting take that I hadn't considered yet, but I like this, and I'm going to be thinking about this one for a while.
A majority of the American
So it's
people.
just an MSNBC agenda. It's just a silly rich white liberal agenda. And I will say I've thought for 20 years that California will only be saved by like Nayib Bukele type figure. Some authoritarian Latino in a cape is going to show up and just impose order on the state. And I'm not being, I am white. I'm not against whites. I love whites. My children are white. But that the fact is they can't do it in that state. Gavin Newsom can't do it. The burden of guilt and self-hatred is too heavy. And you're going to get some guy from Oaxaca who's smart and is going to be like, we're not putting up any of this bullshit at all. And no, you can't camp in LA. And no, you can't do meth in LA. And yes, we are going to have like full reservoir. I mean, do you know what I mean?
It would be
You're
amazing.
Have a Bukele.
It would be amazing if we had that. There was
happen.
There was a majority of the American.
It's gonna happen, he says. I've been thinking about this. I've mentioned on the show a couple times. I'm expecting a figure, a character like this. I don't know if they're ready for a Bukele character right now. I don't know if that character exists out there. The two people who've caught my eye on this front, I'm expecting there to be a recall effort for Gavin Newsom. And I think this is part of why Gavin Newsom is basically groveling at Trump and trying to be like, no, come take pictures with me. Come implicitly endorse me. Lend your figure to me to don't let me just wriggle here. The people who I've suspected so far, Nicole Shanahan and Jillian Michaels, which both of them you might like roll your eyes, but like that's the thing. Like this is California. Like I don't think that they can elect a based right-wing authoritarian white guy. It's just not going to happen. They're not ready for that. Even after all of this, they're not ready for that. However, the guy from Oaxaca who comes in and says, no, you're not going to shit on our streets. I think that there would be a pretty healthy appetite for that sort of thing. California I'm reminded of this tweet from Naval Ravikant where he said that the United States is not a failing European country. It's a functioning Latin American country. And when it collapses, it's going to look more like Mexico than Norway or something to that effect. And this is all the more so for California. California is a Latin American country. Its spirit is Latin American. It's very, very clear. If you've been in California and then you go to other parts of the country, it's very, very clear. California is Latin American. They've got probably more white people than any other state in the country, but this is just the fact of the sheer volume, the sheer number of people in California. Yeah, Josh says California already elected Schwarzenegger as governor. They're okay with foreigners ruling. yeah. There's the majority of the state is foreigners. Okay, another update on a past story. I talked yesterday about Andrew Tate and the Bruv Party, and how my read of this is that Andrew Tate is a front for some sort of military intelligence operation that I would expect to be affiliated with the Pentagon. And there's a pattern. Jason has talked about the Build a Caesar concept. I want to make sure I properly attribute credit here. He's talked about this Build a Caesar concept, and you're seeing this with guys like Milei and Bukele and Trump. And I would put, I think Maloney is sort of in that category a little bit. I would imagine that Viktor Orban is probably in a similar category. And I would put Andrew Tate in the same type of category. Now, I don't necessarily think that he's going to be elected. I think that the chances are not zero. But I don't really give a shit what you think personally about Andrew Tate. I'm not really that big of a fan. I think he is what he is. Devin Erickson had a really good tweet about him. Maybe I'll pull that up later. It'll kind of fit in the later conversation. Maybe I'll fit it in. I got a lot of stuff to get through today. But I see Tate as being another front for the tendrils of what appears to be a pretty deep operation that connects interests behind both the military industrial complex and the tech world and American nativist sentiment, or maybe sovereigntist sentiment, not necessarily nativist, but sovereigntist. And I see Tate as someone who he's in prison in Romania, and then just all of a sudden he just gets out. He's always on house arrest, but he gets out. Man, it was kind of interesting. He seemed like he was really screwed, and then suddenly here he comes. He's back out again. Oh, he must have some powerful friends. So everyone's, it's the CIA. This is CIA and MI6 and Mossad and whatever. I don't necessarily think so, because I don't think that he's the one that's supporting and doing all of this independently. I think he is uniquely qualified for the role he's been chosen for. I think he's very good at resetting the conversation. He's a very good lightning rod. He intentionally says really provocative things to force himself into a conversation. And I mentioned in the last episode, I did a bunch of digging. I couldn't find the exact tweet or video that I was thinking of. But about 2 years ago, he was all the rage. He was a really niche figure before that, but all of a sudden he was all the rage. Everyone was talking about him. And the reason for this was because he put himself there using his Hustlers University thing. It was a total multi-level marketing, affiliate marketing scheme, but it was brilliantly executed. Because what he did is he spoke to the Zoomer male soul in a way that nobody else in the culture will. He has this big bravado, machismo, my Bugattis thing, video games, martial arts, all of this stuff speaks to like the Joe Rogan viewer soul. He captures their attention. He gets them signed up for his Hustlers University thing. And then what he did was each of them would create their own TikTok or Instagram account and clip up videos of him saying super provocative things to make it go viral. And then they were affiliate marketers for him. So if they got people to go sign up for Hustlers University, they would get a cut from it. It was a classic pyramid scheme. But the point of it was not just the money and the pyramid scheme aspect of it. The point of it was manipulating the algorithms to force him into the public eye as a celebrity. At first, I thought that this was something that he started doing after he got out of prison. It turns out that wasn't true. He was doing this before he went to prison. Then he went to prison, and then he just sort of mysteriously was released. And now he's running for British Prime Minister with the Bruv Party, forcing this platform, the platform of the Bruv Party, he's forcing that into the conversation. So whether or not he's actually elected on that platform, someone will be elected on a platform similar to that in this election or the next. So Andrew Tate is being used by someone to realign British politics. And what is it being realigned toward? Well, the same sort of political trend that's happening in El Salvador and Argentina and the United States. And it's adjacent to things like AFD and some of the things that Maloney has talked about in Italy. You're seeing a very clear trend that's entirely, it's not proper to say it's entirely artificial, but it's definitely something that's being astroturfed. Right after this, I'm talking about all this yesterday, and then today, this news breaks. Breaking, Andrew Tate is free from house arrest. So he was released from prison like a year ago, I think. Maybe it was earlier last year. And he was put on house arrest. Well, now he is no longer on house arrest. And this is interesting because I mentioned what Jason had said about how if Andrew Tate was to go to like on the streets in the UK and talk to the mothers and fathers of the girls who have been, let's say, groomed, is the term that they've used, which drastically understates it. If he was to go look them in the eye and tell them, I will be your vengeance. You don't deserve that this happened to you. The people who occupy you are evil, and I will be your vengeance against them. He would become extremely popular. But him being on house arrest would kind of prevent that. Well, now he's no longer on house arrest. Now, a lot of people are, they're saying, well, this is just kind of the natural part of the Romanian justice system. This stuff has to come up for review, and this was just the time for it to come up for review, and this is the judges are obligated to employ the bare minimum standard. And so in this case, if they don't feel like he's a flight risk or they don't feel like he's dangerous in other ways or whatever, then this is just sort of the natural working out of the process. Maybe. Possibly. Or maybe there's more. I don't know. Today, after 5 months of additional house arrest without any evidence, the Bucharest court has lifted the house arrest measure against Tate. And this on its own would have been very interesting to me. Like a big data point. Okay. Right after he announces he's running for prime minister, he gets freed from house arrest. And then this happened. Matt Gaetz, from his personal account, he has his personal account, and then he has his, I think it's like former rep Matt Gaetz, which is like his professional account. It used to be his government account, I think. He says, these charges against Cobra Tate always seemed very suspect. Interesting. So a close Trump insider is signal boosting him and implicitly endorsing him. This lends even more credence to what Jason and I are speculating. That Tate is being used intentionally by many of the same people who are, in my opinion, behind Trump and Bukele and Milei probably. This is a good time to insert, I think, this reminder that I think it's very easy for us to follow these kinds of stories and get into the good guy, bad guy frame. And that good guy, bad guy frame is only useful to a certain point. There exists power centers. And because there are power centers, there is competition for that power. Some of the people who are in competition for that power are much more closely aligned with us, and the things that they want to do for the sake of their own interests will make our lives much better if they're successful in doing that. Now, that doesn't mean that they're friends. I've used this framework of friends, allies, and enemies. And the vast majority of these people that we've identified as, maybe you might call them like American sovereigntists, they go in the allies camp. Now you say, well, they're not friends of ours because of this thing. That's the point. But just because they're not friends of ours doesn't mean that the things that they're doing aren't going to be successful or aren't going to be useful or whatever. What I'm trying to do here is take as objective of a stance as possible in evaluating what's happening, which factions are moving which directions, so we can try to cast a vision for what is coming down the line, what we can expect in the future. And I've spent the last more than a year saying that the tech bros, the MAGA core people, if you're expecting these people to be your friends, you're going to be disappointed because many of them are not friends. But that doesn't make them enemies. There's a third category. That category is allies. Because they are allies, by definition, you disagree on fundamental things. Because if you didn't, you would be friends. So just because someone is not a friend does not make them an enemy. Many of them are allies. And this is the mindset that leads me to, like, I'm cautioning you with Ukraine to keep your expectations measured. My guess is that the Trump administration wants to see the war end, but they don't want to see some great flowering peace and see Europe and Russia holding hands and skipping in the wildflowers. And that's not necessarily a bad thing for us. Because it will benefit the United States economically in the long run. Now, is that a worthy price to pay for more Slavs to experience a worse life? This is geopolitics we're talking about. Some things are just not within our control, and hand-wringing about them isn't going to get you anywhere. You're not going to get the exact perfect policy approach on every single issue that matters to you. But that's not a reason for doom spiraling and crying about how, whatever, they're subverted, they're controlled opposition, whatever. Because it's very obviously not the case. Okay, let's talk a little bit about Pete Hegseth, who is one of these guys who I would consider Pete Hegseth an ally. I think he's probably on the friend side of the ally spectrum, but I'd still consider him an ally. And he spent 4 hours being grilled by senators today. You don't need to watch the whole 4 hours. You can just watch this 11 seconds.
Yes or no? Yes or no?
Veterans organizations that will help our veterans get every damn thing that they deserve because they signed on the dotted line.
This is just begging for an edit. It's a longer one where their voices just fade out and you start getting like whatever's going on in his head. Get some like great song playing or something. I'd rather get sent down range than be subjected to all of this. But there was a couple good quotes that came out of this. This one here, Rep. What's his name? Tim Sheehy from Montana. These whole things are just silly. You're just going to get the Democrats who are going to spaz out about whatever their favorite thing is, and yell and scream and rant and you promised me this, or you're going to promise that in public too, and then you get the Republicans who are going to say, just give him an endorsement, let him say whatever he's going to. This whole thing is just a show, but entertaining, I suppose.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pete, I'm actually going to ask you questions because I want to hear your answer. How many genders are there? Tough one.
Senator, there are 2 genders.
I know that well. I'm a she/he, so I'm on board. What is the diameter of the rifle round fired out of an M4A1 rifle?
That's a 5.56.
How many push-ups can you do?
I did 5 sets of 47 this morning.
What do you think are most important strategic bases in the Pacific?
In the Pacific, Guam is pretty strategically significant.
How many rounds of 5.56 can you fit into the magazine of an M4 rifle?
Depends on the magazine, but standard issue is 30, Senator.
And what size round does the M9 Beretta standard issue sidearm for the military fire?
A 9mm, Senator.
What kind of batteries do you put in your night vision goggle?
Duracell.
So right there, you're representing qualifications that show you understand what the warfighter deals with every single day on the battlefield. You understand what happens on the front line, where our troops will be. And what happens, unfortunately, in this country is decisions made in rooms like this, bad decisions, end up in dead 17, 18, 19-year-old Americans. And those Americans rarely come from families that sit in rooms like this. They come from lower, middle-income families who sometimes the militaries are on the way out. And they join because maybe they want to go to college. Maybe they had no other choice. Maybe they love this country. But for whatever reason, they joined and they signed on the dotted line. And when people like us screw up, they don't come home. And that's the one thing that I care about. As you remember when I shut the door, when you came with your entourage, Senator Coleman, I've known for a long time, and you and I sat together and asked you one question. You remember what that question was?
Are you going to have the backs of the war fighters?
Exactly. What is going to be your number one priority? And I don't care, frankly, what all these letters and articles say. I've been a part of a smear campaign too, I get it. I care that you're going to have one thing in mind when you sit in that chair in that five-sided building, and you told me what that was. So with that, you have my support. I'm sorry you have to go through a process like this.
You know, I have my quibbles with aspects of Hegseth, but at the end of the day, we got a dude who
Thank you, Mr.
we got a dude who looks like this with his background. A dude who the actual warfighters genuinely like and trust. All of my warfighter buddies, they love him. The effect on the spirit and the morale of the military men of having a guy like this as a Secretary of Defense, I think is difficult to quantify. But if my boys love him, I love him too. And this is, I just think about what we've been stuck with as secretaries of defense for as long as I've been alive. A bunch of fucking eggheads. The last one was a gigantic ape-like dude who's most known for wearing this big old mask thing and just disappearing for several weeks and nobody knows where he was. And this guy here, after the hearings today, the polymarket odds are like 95% or something like that he's going to get confirmed, and everyone says they think he's going to get confirmed. So all this big hullabaloo, they ran their typical Kavanaugh shtick, threw all this shit at him. Oh, we're going to stop it. Oh, he's sexual assault in the military, all these different things. And at the end of the day, he's going to get confirmed. All of Trump's picks are going to get confirmed. This machine is grinding forward. And the libs can yell and scream and throw as much sand in our eyes as they want. But nothing's going to change the fact that this machine is grinding forward. Here is some very good news. And let me tell you, he better deliver on this. I think he will, but he better.
How many other men and women? How many other patriots? How many other people of conscience? We haven't even talked about COVID and the tens of thousands of service members who were kicked out because of an experimental vaccine. In President Trump's Defense Department, they will be apologized to. They will be reinstituted with pay and rank. How many other...
Pete Hegseth announces he will reinstate with back pay or restore full retirement benefits to the thousands of service members discharged for refusing to take the experimental COVID vaccine. They will be apologized to with full pay and rank. Now, interestingly, he said in President Trump's Defense Department, not my Defense Department, President Trump's Defense Department. So he knows who the big guy is. He's going to give the big guy credit. He's also, it's pretty clever, I think, because he's also putting the ultimate responsibility for it on Trump. But if it doesn't happen, he's going to get dragged as well. Because his job is going to be to advocate that thing actually happen. He's talked about it. He's made this declaration publicly. His job is going to be to ensure that policy gets followed through on. Yeah, Bryce says he's someone who knows what the average boot went through in the GWAT, and he can speak on camera. Right. Josh Ham says Paul Fahrenheit is one of those kicked out. Yes. Our brothers need their recompense. I think there was one other thing I wanted to comment on in here in the chat. Josh Ham says, quoting imaginary from Andrew Tate, look, white Christian men are second-class citizens in Europe. I wanted a chance at a fair trial, so I said I was a Muslim. I'm free, so it looks like it worked, eh? Yeah, if you think Andrew Tate is actually a Muslim, like he's some devout Muslim, I've got beachfront property in Montana to sell you. There's a running theme here that I think a lot of people expect a lot of other people to be something that they're not. And sometimes you just got to recognize someone is what they are. And brain power wasted on complaining about them not being what they're not and what they never will be. Like, for example, Elon. Like expecting Elon to be something that he's not. And then spending your time crying or flailing about it. You guys are wasting your energy. Protect your vril. Don't dump it out over this is masturbatory stuff. You need to protect your male vitality and don't splooge all over the timeline. Okay, so big news out of Israel. Now I'm reading from Haaretz here, which I generally do not want to do, but in this case, I did it through removepaywall.com because there's an interesting story in here that I want to highlight. So Trump's Mideast envoy forced Netanyahu to accept a Gaza plan he repeatedly rejected. Now, before we read through that, I wanted to give a quick breakdown. I asked Grok to break this down for me. What are the terms of the Gaza peace deal being negotiated right now? The terms of the Gaza peace deal being negotiated as of January 14, 2025 include several key points. Release of hostages and prisoners. The deal involves the release of 33 Israeli hostages in exchange for 1,000 to 1,600 Palestinian prisoners, with the exact number depending on the conditions and composition of the hostages returned. Israeli military withdrawal. Israel has agreed to fully withdraw from Gaza, including from the Philadelphia corridor, which means no troops or security zones will remain in Gaza. This includes a withdrawal to the outer edges of Gaza to allow for the return of displaced Palestinians. A ceasefire and security arrangements. There is an agreement on a temporary cessation of military operations initially, leading to discussions for a permanent ceasefire. The terms include security arrangements at the Philadelphia corridor, with Israel withdrawing from parts of it after the initial phase. Unarmed residents in North Gaza would be allowed to return, with mechanisms ensuring no weapons are moved there. Humanitarian aid and reconstruction. The deal stipulates a significant increase in humanitarian aid into Gaza, where there is a noted severe humanitarian crisis. There are also provisions for the reconstruction of Gaza, though specifics on who would oversee this process of the funding are not detailed in the public reports. And then governance of Gaza. Israel has reportedly agreed to allow Hamas to rule Gaza, which is a significant shift from previous stances where Israel insisted on not allowing Hamas to maintain governance over the area. This is catastrophic for Netanyahu and the Likudniks. This is like worst case scenario. Now, how did this come about? I'll call your guys' minds back to a couple of weeks ago when Trump announced that his longtime close friend and Jewish business leader, Steve Witkoff, would be his, it was like his ambassador for Middle East affairs or something along those lines. And it was like, oh, he's a Zionist. Oh, look at this. Trump's cucking on Israel. Israeli sources is reading from Haaretz. So this is reading from an Israeli newspaper. Israeli sources say that the involvement of the incoming U.S. administration, led by Trump's aggressive Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, revived hostage talks with Hamas. While Netanyahu's propaganda machine claims that Trump has left him no choice, what happens inside his coalition will determine whether the prime minister approves the deal. Last Friday evening, Stephen Witkoff, U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's Middle East envoy, called from Qatar to tell Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's aides that he would be coming to Israel the following afternoon. The aides politely explained that was in the middle of the Sabbath, but that the prime minister would gladly meet him Saturday night. Witkoff's blunt reaction took them by surprise. He explained to them in salty English that Shabbat was of no interest to him. His message was loud and clear. Thus, in an unusual departure from official practice, the prime minister showed up at his office for an official meeting with Witkoff, who then returned to Qatar to seal the deal. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu could give a shit about Shabbat. This was a power move. And Netanyahu, through his aides, tried to put his dick on the table and got it chopped off. He got big dicked by Witkoff operating at the behest of Trump. A week before Trump's inauguration, Jerusalem already sees a change in the rules of the game that has broken the deadlock in the hostage negotiations. Unusually, the outgoing Biden administration has let Witkoff lead the process. on the grounds that any obligations the United States undertakes will be incumbent on Trump, not on Biden. Witkoff is a Jewish real estate investor and developer who is close to Trump. He doesn't have the background of the kind of people who usually fill diplomatic roles. Quote, Witkoff isn't a diplomat. He doesn't talk like a diplomat. He has no interest in diplomatic matters and diplomatic protocols, says a senior Israeli diplomat who spoke on condition of anonymity. He's a businessman who wants to reach a deal quickly and charges ahead unusually aggressively. In fact, Witkoff has forced Israel to accept a plan that Netanyahu had repeatedly rejected over the past half year. Hamas has not budged from its position that the hostages' freedom must be conditioned on the release of Palestinian prisoners, the easy part, and the complete Israeli withdrawal from Gaza, the hard one. Netanyahu rejected this condition, and thus was born the partial deal proposed by Egypt. Initially, the talk was of a limited humanitarian deal. More and more conditions were slowly appended until it grew into a much bigger proposal with clear outlines: a hostage release, new regional arrangements, and full withdrawal. The Philadelphia corridor, which Netanyahu last summer termed the bedrock of Israel's existence, is part of the deal. At Egypt's request, Israel will fully withdraw from it in the first phase. It's hard to know how Netanyahu feels about this aggressive behavior. While it provides an excuse he can give to his base, he may resent being dragged into an unwanted deal that will end the war and possibly lead to political upheaval at home. If the war ends, Netanyahu is going to prison. His legacy is going to be obliterated. He's wildly unpopular. The only reason that he's not in prison is because of the ongoing war. His propaganda machine is pushing the no-choice narrative that it's Trump. On Monday, laments began to be heard on Channel 14 that Trump isn't what we thought. Quote, I'm surprised all the senior officials in the U.S. administration are saying the same thing, Yotam Zimri said on the Patriots program. If this doesn't happen by the time Trump comes in, Hamas will understand what hell is. I don't understand the Israeli interest in at least not waiting for Trump. Yanan Magal answered, it's because Trump is pressing to do it. That's what's happening. Zimri, so all his people have been lying. It's a big disappointment. Magal, he talks about hell and in the meantime sends his envoy to sign a deal. It's a deal whose impact will be very difficult. That's the truth. He added that the last remaining hope is that Hamas will reject a deal. Quote, a cabinet minister told me we need to pray again that God will harden Pharaoh's heart. These people are fucking insane. Monday morning, another Netanyahu mouthpiece, Jacob Bardugo, said, quote, the pressure Trump is exerting right now is not the kind that Israel expected from him. The pressure is the essence of the matter. So now I want to remind you guys of a couple of stories here. First of all, this is from December of 2021 on Axios. Trump blasts Netanyahu for disloyalty. Quote, fuck him. Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu were the closest of political allies during the 4 years they overlapped in office, at least in public. Not anymore. I haven't spoken to him since, Trump said of the former Israeli prime minister. Fuck him. Trump repeatedly criticized Netanyahu during 2 interviews for my book, Trump's Peace, The Abraham Accords and the Reshaping of the Middle East. The final straw for Trump was when Netanyahu congratulated President-elect Biden for his election victory while Trump was still disputing the result. Quote from Trump, the first person that congratulated Biden was Bibi Netanyahu, the man that I did more for than any other person I dealt with. Bibi could have stayed quiet. He has made a terrible mistake. Now opposition leader Netanyahu is waging a continuous campaign to win back the prime minister's office while on trial for corruption. One of his primary political calling cards is his close relationship with key players in U.S. politics, and with one man in particular who remains hugely popular in Israel, Trump. For domestic political reasons, both Trump and Netanyahu cultivated the public perception that there was no daylight between them as they worked closely together on key issues. But by the end of his presidency, Trump had concluded that Netanyahu didn't really want peace with the Palestinians and was using him on Iran. You think? Trump also felt he'd helped ensure Netanyahu's political survival, but didn't get the same in return. He positively fumed about the video in which Netanyahu congratulated Biden. Quote, I liked Bibi. I still like Bibi, but I also like loyalty. The first person to congratulate Biden was Bibi. And not only did he congratulate him, he did it on tape, Trump told me, referring to Netanyahu by his nickname. So not only did he just do it privately, he did it publicly. He could have just done it privately, but he did it publicly, specifically because he wanted to stab me in the back. Netanyahu is far from the first world leader to congratulate Biden. In fact, he waited more than 12 hours after the U.S. networks called the election. But Trump claimed he was shocked when his wife Melania shared Netanyahu's video with him. So that's how he found out about it. Melania's like, hey, check this out. Quote, he was very early, like earlier than most. I haven't spoken to him since. Fuck him. Trump saying in an interview, fuck him, is just about as strong of a statement as you can get. The former president was fixated on the fact that while the likes of Brazil's Jair Bolsonaro and Russia's Vladimir Putin held off, they felt the election was they felt the election was rigged, Trump claimed. Netanyahu acknowledged Biden's win. Quote, for Bibi Netanyahu, before the ink was even dry, to do a message, and not only a message, to do a tape to Joe Biden talking about their great, great friendship, they didn't have a friendship, because if they did, the Obama administration wouldn't have done the Iran deal, Trump said. And guess what? Now they're going to do it again. Those remarks came during a 90-minute face-to-face interview at Mar-a-Lago in April, during which Trump repeatedly contended that he'd done more for Israel and more for Netanyahu than any other president. He cited his decisions to withdraw from the Iran deal, move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, keep troops in the region, and recognize the occupied Golan Heights as part of Israel. He noted that he announced the Golan Heights move right before the election in April 2019, when Netanyahu had been trailing in the polls. Quote, he would have lost the election if it wasn't for me. You're getting this story here is perhaps one of the clearest looks you'll ever get into Trump's psychology. Anybody who tries to apply some sort of an ideological lens to the things that he says and does is just lost the plot. He's a deal maker. He is exactly what he's told you he is. He wants to make good deals. He doesn't care who you are. He doesn't care what your background is. He wants to make deals with you. But you know who he won't make deals with? Someone who betrays him. Because loyalty is paramount. So he's pro-Israel because by being pro-Israel, he can get concessions on stuff that he wants, and he's happy to make a deal with them. And he likes to go to Israel. He's got Jewish friends. Steve Witkoff is Jewish. He likes to go to Jerusalem. Go, like Tucker Carlson says, like sitting there and like eating food and hanging out and relaxing in this beautiful city. It's wonderful. It's a great place. But he's an American. And so if Israel or Israel's representatives are going to double cross him or backstab him or not deal honestly with him, then he's going to fucking crush him. That's exactly what he's doing. Now, this happens right after I'm going to play this video for you guys again, in case someone missed it. Just a couple of days ago, Trump shared this video of Jeffrey Sachs.
The war in Syria, and you may actually hear from grown-up reporters who are lying through their teeth or ignorant beyond imagining that, oh, the war in Syria, yes, Russia intervened in Syria. Well, do you know that that Obama tasks the CIA to overthrow the Syrian government, starting 4 years before Russia intervened? What kind of nonsense is that? And how many times did the New York Times report on Operation Timber Sycamore, which was the presidential order to the CIA to overthrow Bashar al-Assad? 3 times in 10 years. This is not democracy. This is a game. And it's a game of narrative. Why did the U.S. invade Iraq in 2003? Well, first of all, it was completely phony pretenses. It wasn't, oh, we were so wrong, they didn't have weapons of mass destruction. They actually did focus groups in the fall of 2002 to find out what would sell that war to the American people. Abe Shulsky, if you want to know the name of the PR genius. They did focus groups on the war. They wanted the war all the time. They had to figure out how to sell the war to the American people, how to scare the shit out of the American people. It was a phony war. Where did that war come from? You know what? It's quite surprising. That war came from Netanyahu, actually. You know that? It's weird. And the way it is that Netanyahu had from 1995 onward the theory that the only way we're going to get rid of Hamas and Hezbollah is by toppling the governments that support them. That's Iraq, Syria, and Iran. And the guy's nothing if not obsessive. And he's still trying to get us to fight Iran this day, this week. He's a deep, dark son of a bitch, sorry to tell you, because he's gotten us into endless wars, and because of the power of all of this in the U.S. politics, he's gotten his way. But that war was totally phony. So what is this democracy versus dictatorship? Come on. These are not even sensible terms.
I don't think that you can take it as a coincidence that Trump shares this video like 3 days ago or something like this, and then this deal gets negotiated the way it did. And for those Trump handshake analyzer people, and this is also useful for this is so all that background I talked about. the perspective that Trump has towards Netanyahu, the way that he's treating him now, bullying him into submission. This is how he met him. This was in July of 2024.
Watch the best part.
Now watch for the handshake. Yoink! Now, look at the body language. Bibi, you stand here on the side, and I'm going to focus on your wife. I'm going to yank you around, and now I'm going to turn my body away from you, turn and focus on your wife, and you can just stand back there, whatever, and just we're going to take a picture.
Great.
I remember when this happened, there was a bunch of retards who were spurging out. Oh, look at the Dawn. Look at it. Israel's pet. Just remember this. Remember the sequence of fuck him and this picture. Look at this. We're friends. We're going to take a picture together. I'm going to jerk you around while we do it. And now I'm going to politically steamroll you because you betrayed me. You need my support more than I need you. This is the response. This is number one from Netanyahu's mouthpiece.
טראמפ נבחר, אמרתי כאן שהראשונים לשלם את מחיר הבחירה שלו יהיו האוקראינים, טעיתי. יכול להיות שהם ראשונים את מחיר הבחירה של טראמפ.
The other video I saw had someone was reading over it with the translation. He says, "We're the first to pay the price for Trump's election. We are being forced into this deal. I don't think this is what we planned or expected. We thought we would take control of the northern Gaza Strip and prevent humanitarian aid from being brought in." And then another one here. Israeli media is crystal clear. All it took to get a ceasefire deal done was pressure from Trump on Netanyahu, who folded immediately. Now, Netanyahu is very unpopular within Israel. So these are motivated media networks. But what this means is Netanyahu is getting humiliated. Biden refused to do that for 15 months. As a Saudi diplomat told me, Biden considered any pressure on Israel as, quote, tainting his legacy. Here's some headlines. Netanyahu didn't want to end up like Canada or spend his retirement in Greenland. He's convinced himself to accept Trump's outline, which was already being considered in May. All that remains is to mourn the lost time, the hostages who were murdered in captivity, and the fighters who were killed in vain. Negotiations for the deal faltered until Trump sent the man to the Middle East on special missions. Trump will claim that his threat sealed the deal. Biden will say that the deal was the one he presented back in May. It is hoped the two can agree that the deal was sealed thanks to American pressure. The hostage deal. Trump's madness became the Trump card. It's not just that Bibi is afraid of Trump. He is irrational, and therefore his threats have a greater impact. He doesn't play by any rules. He came to create chaos in the political system and in the orders that were customary until now. And Netanyahu agreed to Trump's outline, even at the cost of the hostages' lives. Netanyahu's convinced himself to accept it. This is the same headline. Okay. Now, this is also a worthwhile point. Netanyahu cancels trip to Trump's inauguration. What do you do when Netanyahu cancels his attendance at an event? You intensify security. Given the pressure, how existential this is for Netanyahu, it's a worthy point. But I do think that he's a lame duck at this point. Tom Luongo highlighted this quick related point. Breaking, Iran and Russia will sign a 20-year strategic partnership agreement this coming Friday. Moscow says the agreement will guarantee the security of the two countries. Now, why haven't they done this before? Perhaps, this is just speculation, but perhaps Russia wasn't willing to move forward with something like this until there was some more daylight between Iran and Israel, so that Russia's not signing themselves on for a massive liability. Now that there's more daylight there and they're not going to necessarily be directly engaged in hostilities, who knows if this is actually what's going to happen, but if they're not going to be directly engaged in hostility, now Russia may feel more comfortable bringing Iran formally under their umbrella. Tom Luongo says, will Putin and Trump finally put a leash on both of their proxies? One can only hope. Indeed. All right. Now, I have to go take a leak real quick and grab something else to drink because I've still got a lot of talking to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you guys a quick video to watch here, a little timeline a little timeline cleanse. We're gonna have a brief intermission. You can watch this content here that my son. I can't wait to show this to my son. He lives for this sort of thing. But enjoy this brief intermission, and I will be back shortly. Oh, I can tell this video touched the soul of every XY chromosome haver in the chat. That was perfect for the perfect length intermission. I was able to say goodnight to the little guy down there. And I'm going to make sure he sees this video tomorrow, because this is like exactly the content on YouTube that he just sits, he absolutely loves. I don't think he's ever seen anything exactly like this, but he will watch this and be enraptured. Okay. So let's start this segment off here. No, Josh, I did not see that before you sent it to me. You were the one who brought that onto my radar. We're going to start this off here with this thought here from Dudley Newright at Newright Post. One of the best names. He says, life is complex. You got to be able to hold two ideas in your head at the same time. This speaks directly to my soul. I've had this one. I've had a couple of these here queued up for a few days and haven't been able to quite get to them. And it actually works out perfectly because this aligns exactly with what I wanted to talk about today. You got to be able to hold two ideas in your head at the same time. Lily Phillips is an unrepentant whore who's responsible for her decisions, and nobody acts like that who wasn't traumatized as a child. Zoomer men are tragic victims of massive economic and social decline, and they should develop a sense of agency and try harder. Trump isn't our dark enlightenment Caesar, and his victory is probably a step in the right direction. The fires in LA were a result of administrative malpractice, and it was an act of God. The rich libs probably had it coming, and it's sad that all those people lost their homes. You need to grow beyond the moral reasoning of a toddler, Anon. And of course, you have he says, this post was cringe and correct. And this picture is too perfect. Giga Chad holds each side in his hand and dances within the tension they create. So this is you. Every time, just imagine this. Every time that you are able to do this, hold two ideas in your head at the same time, you are this guy. This is you, the Giga Chad, holding both ideas simultaneously and dancing on the tension in between. Now let us continue. Several of these things here are I'm going to go scattershot through them, and they're sort of related, but I want to lay the groundwork for other comments down the line. This from Semiagog. He says, there is such a thing as containment, usually deceitful and sometimes malicious. Containment being, people say someone like, I don't know, for example, Chris Rufo is containment. Scott Pressler or Ben Shapiro, or there's all these different people who one person or another says, oh, he's containment. He's containment. It's sort of like an updated version of he's a Fed. So there is such a thing as containment. People whose job is to contain and prevent the emergence of radical extremes. It's usually deceitful and sometimes malicious, which is an interesting distinction to make. Just because something is deceitful wouldn't necessarily mean it's malicious. This doesn't change the fact that some of what gets called containment is just partial accommodation. Now, remember what I just said. You have to be able to hold two ideas at the same time. What Dudley Newright said. You have to hold two ideas at the same time. So yes, containment does exist, but also a lot of what gets called containment is partial accommodation. Rootstock replies, I think you could say that partial accommodation is one of the tactics of containment. And Semiagog, in turn, replies, likewise, partial success is one of the tactics of successful goal-oriented behavior. Just I don't know how many words, not very many words here, but so much of the content that is brought to my mind to talk about on the show can be reduced to this little conversation right here. Just because there's containment doesn't mean there's not partial accommodation. And I would say that in many cases, especially if you have the posture of I'm the indefatigable one, I'm the powerful one, I'm the one who's going somewhere, my trajectory is assured, and I'm putting my head down and I'm grinding on this trajectory because I know where I'm going, then you can just treat containment as partial accommodation. Yep, thank you very much. I know you wanted to contain me, but I'm just accepting this as partial surrender to me. This mindset flies in the face of, and I think is prevented by the existence of the mindset that says we need to root out all of the containment people. We need to dedicate our lives to finding the containment and drawing it to the surface and yelling and screaming at it until it goes away or something. It's like the second step has the question marks. You yell at the containment and then something happens and then you prosper or you're successful. And partial success is one of the tactics of successful goal-oriented behavior. So if you have a goal, obtaining that goal partially is a very good tactic for obtaining that goal fully. And the containment types, here I'm going to flip it around. The containment types are often the ones who say you can't settle for partial success because that's just containment. They're giving you a little bit so that they can keep you pacified and contained. So you can't accept the little bit that you get. You must only settle for the most. And if someone isn't going to give you everything at once, then you just have to shit your pants and throw food on the wall or something. This is the latent libertarian mentality that proliferates far too much in the online discourse. No, that guy's just a statist. You can't get a property tax reduction. All tax is theft. You can't accept just some deportations. All of them have to go. You can't just accept the deportation of illegal immigrants. We have to do a bunch of legal ones too. And if you don't accept that, it's containment. That itself is containment. Now, another point, not directly related, but I'm trying to tie a bunch of threads together here. This is from Possum Reviews. This is not a straw man argument. This is what they believe in their own words. Now, this is going to give you a great opportunity here to practice this hold two ideas at the same time. There's a post from Reddit. If all farmers suddenly disappeared tomorrow, we'd go hungry for a little bit before we figured it out and we're just fine. And that's because it's a job that literally anyone could do. We have the farmers we do because they're the ones who inherited a shit ton of land for their great-grandfather, not because they have some highly specialized set of skills the rest of us couldn't possibly figure out with just a few Google searches. This is patently absurd. This is preposterously Reddit-brained. And yet there's some truth in this. Many of these sorts of skills, not all of the skills necessary to be a successful farmer, but many of the skills necessary to be a successful farmer can be learned online. This is true. It's not as difficult now to become a farmer as it used to be. And now, anybody could theoretically become a farmer if they wanted to. There's a whole panoply of tutorials and trainings and homesteading courses and homesteading groups and regenerative agriculture, all kinds of stuff out there. If you really truly want to be a farmer, then now more than just about any other time in history, any random individual person could go out and choose to become a farmer. Having this in your pocket at all times gives you the capacity. What it does is it makes not having the information no longer a valid excuse. I don't know how to do that. is not a valid excuse. Contained within this thing is all of the knowledge you would possibly need to get started and learn how to do something. Is higher education a racket? Absolutely, 100%. I've got something like $60,000 in student loans that's in deferment right now since COVID because I can't afford to pay on all of it where we're at in life right now. And I don't have a degree. I spent 5 years in college. I don't have a degree. A lot of that was because I was fucking around. A lot of it was because I was going to a college that was way too expensive. I was going to a private college. I didn't need to do that. I could have gone to a community college, but I was following the track that had been laid down for me. Go to the college from the church. I was Seventh-day Adventist. It was a Seventh-day Adventist college, $30,000 a year. Got to go there because if I go to the public college, you know, that's where all the sinners are. So I followed the path that was given to me and ended up dropping out because I was trying to work full-time my way through college and I just couldn't hack it and jumped around degrees too much and wound up no degree, whole bunch of student debt. Whole system is utterly fucked. And tons and tons and tons of millennials and Zoomers have been absolutely beholed by this whole process. Completely screwed over. This is very true. At the same time, now, if you really want to, you can learn more than you could ever learn in college on your own in your free time. So not knowing how to do something isn't an excuse. And it's the greatest networking device of all time. I don't know the person necessary to get that thing that I want. Not an excuse. Or that is an excuse. That's all it is. Not a justification. Again, whole bunch of scattershot things here, and I'm going to tie it together down the line. This is a Ukrainian man escapes conscription squads at the last minute. Now, I don't know if this is actually exactly what it is, but it's a useful depiction of what is actually happening. So what are the two thoughts that we need to hold in our heads at the same time? Shit really sucks in the U.S. right now. A lot of us have really been done hard. There's been a concerted, protracted effort to erode every social institution that we could depend upon and effectively outlaw our ability to obtain wealth and prosperity, and just we're being ground in the mill of the collapse of the post-war consensus. And also, we have it way, way better than we could. Things could be so much worse than they are right now. And if we don't want it to get to the point where it's so much worse, we're going to have to do more than try to figure out whose fault it is that we got to where we are right now. That's only one small part of it. And that part doesn't matter unless we do the other part, which is whatever is necessary to get ourselves out of this trajectory. It doesn't matter who got us onto it, except for to the extent that we can solve for getting ourselves off of it. And now, a couple of clips from Tucker, who is, these are old. These are, I don't know, 6, 7, 8, 10 years old, something like that. And he's been cooking on this stuff for a long time, and he's getting more and more radical.
A conservative worldview would take account of what people actually want as expressed by what they do, not by what they should want. And I feel like everything has gotten, think tank world is so abstract. You literally have, and I've worked in think tank world. I mean, I've been here for 34 years, so I know the way the city works. And I've seen people have debates like, well, you know, that's inconsistent with the tenets of capitalism. And I'm like, I don't worship capitalism. I worship God, like whatever. I'm a Christian, but leaving that aside, this is not a religion. It's a mechanical, you know what I mean?
So people can have better
structure.
lives.
Exactly right. But if your system is making it impossible for my children to get married, then I am totally happy to set your system on fire and blow it up. Because what is the point? To serve the system? I'm not serving a system. I'm serving my children.
Fire. And another one. That last one is from Woe, at Treble Woe on Twitter. Shout out to the Powerful Mutual. This is from Bumbadum 14 on Twitter. Says, Tucker settled this conversation years ago. All of you sound like Ben Shapiro in the worst way imaginable.
You go to North Dakota and get a fracking job.
Yeah, leave your parents' graves in the town you grew up in to move to some soulless city and become a cog in some thing.
Well, I mean, that's the biblical mandate. Leave the land that you've known and go to some place for adventure.
I don't know. It's a mixture of both. And I would, to answer your initial question, anyone who argues that any of this is going to be fixed by a person or a bill that makes its way through Congress or new Supreme Court justice is lying to you. That's a grotesque and dishonest oversimplification of the sort that politicians and, by the way, talk show hosts specialize in. And so to the extent I played a role in lying about that, I'm sorry. I never want to be that guy. I always want to acknowledge how complex and multifaceted all of these problems are, because they are. I'm merely making a couple of very obvious observations.
That there are downsides to this
We
stuff.
are not servants of our economic system. We are not here to serve as shareholders. We're human beings.
You go to North Dakota and get a fracking job.
More fire from Tucker. Now, within that last comment he made, we are not here to serve as servants of our economic system. What that means, and he mentioned this a little earlier on in the clip, is not just, oh, that's right, the system is screwed, the system is screwing us, it's designed to screw us, and get it out of there. That shouldn't be your only takeaway from that. The implicit takeaway is that that's not going to solve the problem. There's no one coming to save you. Daddy's not waiting around the corner, and if you just yell loud enough, then he's going to show up and come in, and someone's just going to change all the policies. You know, I see Josh Hawley's out there. He says, we need to make the child tax credit, take it from $2,000 to $5,000 or something like that. Okay, great, cool. That's nice. Little pronatalism around the edges. Cool. Nice. It's cool that someone wants to do something like that. I mean, I'm probably more bullish than just about anybody on the potential of the Trump administration to do massively transformative things. But the problems are not going to be solved by someone with the right policies coming in and writing something on a piece of paper or a tweet or filing it in the Federal Register or whatever to make things different. If you are not a servant to your economic system, you're also not a servant to your political system. You have to take responsibility for it. If the economic system is skewed against you, then recognizing it's skewed against you and being upset about that is just step one. The next step is figuring out how to make it work for you. No matter what. And not for some vague, abstract conception of a bunch of people who are kind of like you, but you specifically. I'm very sympathetic to both sides of this Bootstraps discourse. And you guys may be wondering what exactly I'm talking about here. So I'm going to give you just kind of a brief overview, because ultimately I think this whole thing it's very emotionally charged. I understand why it is. And I'm very sympathetic to the people who are very emotionally charged about it. But ultimately, I think it's largely a waste of time to spend on this, doing this sort of thing over and over and over again. And we don't have time to waste. Because the situation is so bad. And there's a part of me that's like, if you think you have all the time to sit around here and like debate and post bangers and whatever, I mean, if you're monetizing it and that's part of how you're navigating through the system, okay, more power to you. It's basically what I'm doing. But if you have the time to sit around here and post base takes and yell about it and come up with the best way to dunk on the boomer lib or whatever of the day, well, it must not be too bad. And this isn't like oh, you should be just working nonstop 24/7, never. Again, remember, holding two thoughts at the same time. So when I say I think this sort of thing is really just kind of preaching to the choir, which has some limited utility. Like, yeah, we need to keep the band together, make sure we're all on the same page, suss out who's a friend, who's an enemy. All this stuff is good. But it's only good within the larger context of taking it somewhere and doing something with it. So Chris Rufo is having his Vivek moment, and it's not really the first one. And this gets back to what I was saying earlier, where I think a lot of people have the reactions that I see them have to certain people like Vivek or Elon or Chris Rufo or James Lindsay even or whatever, makes me think that they had way too high of expectations for that person in the first place. So, oops, this is the wrong tweet. This is to start with. So the gist of the discourse is the boomer, you got to pull yourself up by your bootstraps versus the zoomer, fuck your gay ass system and we want to burn you alive. Like, these are like the two sides of the equation. And personally, like emotionally or psychologically or temperamentally, I'm very much on the latter side. But it's like, because I'm so much on that side, I find myself sort of detaching from this dialectic and seeing it from I don't know, further up. So these guys are going back and forth on it, and Rufo says this: every generation has challenges. We currently have huge problems with the cost of housing and a splintering culture, but the economy is strong, incomes have never been higher, trades are hiring apprentices straight out of high school, and tech has enabled a wave of entrepreneurship and high-income email jobs, quote-unquote, from anywhere on Earth. Regardless of what you think about Chris Rufo, some of this is true, some of this is not. The economy is not strong. This is absurd. Because the economy is not just numbers. If a whole bunch of people think the economy isn't strong, that means the economy isn't strong. This is one of those things. You can engineer whatever you want with whatever set of numbers to tell whatever story you want. But if a whole bunch of people are all saying this shit sucks, the economy is terrible, that means the economy is terrible. Incomes have never been higher. Who cares what your nominal income is? What is your real income? Trades are hiring apprentices straight out of high school. Yeah, that's true. That's good. Tech has enabled a wave of entrepreneurship and high-income email jobs from anywhere on Earth. Not just email jobs either. I mean, yeah, you could get the email job. There's issues with that. Like, a lot of these email jobs are really not all that spiritually rewarding. But on the flip side, if you need to do a non-spiritually rewarding job to navigate your way through a crisis, if you were in the situation where you're having to contemplate that possibility, you don't have the luxury of saying, I'm too good for this. I'm not going to demean myself with this. And to say that taking on one of these jobs that's not spiritually rewarding is somehow like a humiliation routine or something is to directly humiliate and shit on the people who are inhabiting those jobs right now. He continues, we should remember that the boomers, whatever their faults, had to navigate their way in a much poorer America and had to navigate war, stagflation, recession, and high interest rates. It's never a cakewalk. This is true. It also is kind of irrelevant. We should work to provide opportunity for our kids, but should also remind them to be grateful for the opportunities they have. This is very true. I didn't make $50,000 a year or own a car until I was 30. Then after years of struggle in a creative field, things paid off. I could live in Seattle or New York or DC, but choose to live in a small town. He lives in fucking Gig Harbor. Yeah, it's a small town technically, but it's effectively part of Seattle. I'm from there. It's incredibly expensive relative to the rest of the country. It's all a trade-off, and one can make a good life in almost any metro area in the U.S. That's true. One can, theoretically, make a good life in almost any metro area in the U.S. That doesn't remove the fact that the entire economic system is FUBAR. And it's screwing over a whole bunch of people. Now, also, it's freaking Chris Rufo, man. How do you not realize at this point that Chris Rufo is what Chris Rufo is? By turning it into a flame Chris Rufo war, you're not diminishing his power and influence, you're increasing it. I've said for a really long time, this is where I really want to take this. I've said for a really long time that the right-wing Twitter commentariat, thought circle, whatever you want to call it. We've got our Twitter accounts, we've got our YouTube channel, we've got our Discourse, we've got our Telegrams. We're all talking about all these ideas. We've got lots of very good ideas that are very, very valuable. What we're largely very short on is entrepreneurial instinct and competence in sales and marketing. One thing you must understand. When you're dealing within the realms of sales and marketing, which is what getting into a public flame war with Chris Rufo is about, haters are very good for business. If you can inspire rabid haters, you are assuring that you're going to have passionate lovers. So this, like, we're going to bludgeon Chris Rufo into irrelevance, it doesn't happen. All you're doing is you're securing his sinecures for him. Making Chris Rufo the trending issue on Twitter is not diminishing Chris Rufo's power or like kicking him out of the club or something. He is what he is. He's a 90s lib mercenary. If you want to diminish Chris Rufo's power, stop talking about him. Ignore him. Mass block him. He's done a lot of his stuff with DEI because he's rallied the MAGA right-wing masses and served as like a figurehead to take on these agendas. So don't give him his troops anymore. Just block him. It doesn't have to be really wild and emotional and performative. Just say, all right, it's very clear what his feelings and his objectives are, and they're not in alignment with ours, so he's done. Now, the thing is, we're still in relative numbers. We're still such a small little segment of the population that it's not really going to do that much to him. And this is where you have to have some self-awareness. If you're shocked and upset and angry about Chris Rufo revealing himself to be Chris Rufo, then like maybe the feeling is justified on the terms of like the things he's saying and doing are objectively absurd and insulting to young white guys, largely. But he's also freaking Chris Rufo. What did you expect? You're going to spend, like, devote all of this headspace to being really upset with Chris Rufo? We don't have the luxury of this. We don't have the luxury to spend time. Just freaking knocked my phone across the yard or across the room. We don't have the luxury of spending time on people like this. There's no utility to be had in bludgeoning him into submission. If you actually want to turn him and make him like based Chris Rufo or something, I don't know why you would want that, but if you did want that, the way to do it would not be to flame him. He might be open to having, I'm sure he'd probably be open to having a conversation with someone. I don't really think it's going to change his mind because at the end of the day, he's a lib. He's an ally at best. You don't need him to be a friend. He's just an ally. And the context further down on here, this guy, Pedantic Killjoy, what a great name. He says, people keep telling me the economy is strong, but every time I look at the news, I see layoffs and businesses closing. Personally, I'm doing just fine, but I can see with my own eyes that something is fucked. Not sure what to believe here. And Rufo says, this is basically full employment. The Panda Express near my house is offering $70K a year plus benefits for the assistant manager. You can make $100K per year working at Chipotle for a few years and working up to store manager. And he's got a thing here from Perplexity about the general unemployment. The unemployment rates are such bullshit. They're completely gamed, just like the CPI. Posting this is like, this is normie tier stuff. But I don't expect Chris Rufo to be like super based and understanding all of the economic lies of the system and all. Like I don't expect him to be that or need him to be that. But this here has become Chris Rufo's Vivek tweet. 4.5 million views. He's going to be stuck with this one for a long time. He stepped in it. Now, the optics of this are just absolutely terrible. If you don't go to college, you're going to be stuck working fast food. Hey, everything's not that bad. You can go be a fast food manager. But here's the thing. He's right for some people. This reminds me of one of the thoughts that I had with the Vivek tweet is if you read the Vivek tweet or you read this tweet and you're listening to this show and you're thinking about yourself, plugging yourself in there as if he's saying this to you, or Vivek was saying what he was saying to you, then yeah, it's like offensive. Like, how fucking dare you talk to me like that? But now take this message and direct it at some like millennial soy boy who collects Funko Pops. Yeah, for him, this is probably pretty good. Go make $70K per year in Gig Harbor working at Panda Express. And there's a whole lot more of those guys than there are of our guys. Antifa, BLM, all the white guys who worked for Kamala's campaign team, her campaign staff. There was white guys in there. The Harry Sissons of the world. Those aren't my people. I don't think it's offensive to tell them that they should be happy that they could go get a $100K per year job working at Chipotle. Yeah, is it humiliating? Maybe. I don't know. Maybe not for someone. He continues with the Norman Rockwell meme. It's actually good that Americans without a degree or a trade can live in a nondescript suburb and earn $100K per year driving for UPS or managing a restaurant. There's a lot of people out there that it would do them very well to have a humble, menial job and just do their best. In fact, that's the majority of people, the majority of young guys even. You don't necessarily have to be stuck at that job forever. But you can just work a job that's not sexy, that's not your aspirational thing. Those jobs do exist. You can go get them. And you know what? That might be necessary for you. If that's the only thing that's available to you, you can have all these academic conversations dealing with all these things in the abstract. But regardless of what's going to happen on a policy level or who's going to advocate for what change in the economic system, regardless of all of those things, at the end of the day, you've got to put food on your table. And so sitting here looking at Twitter and seeing a bunch of people who say, oh, you shouldn't, don't even use it. It's beneath you to go get a job at a fast food place. You deserve better than that, comrade. That's not good messaging. That's not spiritually healthy. Because again, remember, at the end of the day, you are the only one who is responsible for where you are and for getting you out of that. And this isn't the boomers, oh, you just got to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and go print off your resume and walk into the McDonald's and look the guy in the eye and shake his hand. He'll give you a job. Go work that job there. Start contributing to your retirement. Work your way up and go get a pension. Yeah, boomers were able to do that because they lived in a fake world. At the beginning of the creation of this insane US dollar fiat system, they rode this wave up. They did a bunch of really weird, strange things like work 40-hour weeks and get a degree that immediately translates to a job where you can buy a house right away and you can pay that house off. You buy the house for $30,000 and by the time you're 50, you've got your house paid off and you own it and you own all the property and you got your boats and you've got your fully funded pension, your retirement accounts. You can retire and go golfing and go traveling. This is a fake world. The boomers were like the golden handcuffs generation. The fact that they were artificially guided up through this fake economic system is actually bad for them. And none of the boomers are going to want to hear that. But it was bad for them because it disabled them from being able to relate to the future generations. And they're living themselves on credit, ultimately. So the wealth that they're developing is fake. It's extracted from the future generations. And the future generations, this is like a limited time game that not everybody could participate in. But because they were successful with it, they told the future generations, oh, you just got to do the same thing I did and you'll be successful. And that's become less and less true the further down the line we've gone. But that doesn't make the boomers the villains. They're not the ones who created the system that they were brought up in. That was the silent generation. But the silent generation, they weren't the villains either. That was the greatest generation. The generation of the tyrannical father that ate its children. And you can keep doing this further and further back. Remember, I was talking at the earlier part of the show that you can have systems like this that generate outcomes in this emergent way where no specific person or no specific demographic of people are necessarily responsible for it. And that's where we are today. Everyone's responsible for it and no one's responsible for it. And the only way it's going to change is when men put their foot down and say it changes now. And that doesn't just mean we're going to make new policies. That's a small part of it. The largest part of it is going to require men who are willing to embrace the suck, to do difficult, humiliating, seemingly unnecessary things, being washed over with resentment at other people that put them in a situation where they had to do this, and yet they do it anyways. This is the sacrifice that's necessary to build a civilization. I've got a couple more, some more commentary along these lines, and then I'm going to give you guys some examples of guys who are actually putting their money where their mouth is on this sort of thing. And I know full well that the 1, 2, 3, 4, all four of these guys are, they divide opinion. Many people are not fans of them. But I don't give a shit. What they're saying is correct. The first one, longtime listeners of the show are well aware of the Gunix, a term we coined, and we being Cooper and I, we badged Zero HP Lovecraft as the chief of the Gunix. These sorts of shit-stirring nihilist right-wingers who have these very fascinating intellectual breakdowns, very, very insightful guys, but who at the end of it, they slip in just this little bit of nihilism, which is you can't do anything about it. You just got to wait till daddy comes home and fixes everything for you. And until then, just rage. Seethe. This is the vengeful son. This is like cultivating the vengeful son spirit. He hates his dad. He wants to destroy everything that his dad stands for. Because he's overcome by the betrayal, the generational betrayal of his mother, the devouring or the smothering mother, his father, the tyrannical father, and the generational betrayal that they have engaged in and left him wanting, left him hurting, left him resentful. Then Zero HP went and disappeared from Twitter for a few months and apparently bonked his head or something, because since he came back, he's been a changed man. Very measured, reasonable takes. Here's this one. He says, the pull yourself up by your bootstraps debate is my least favorite X topic, but my stance is the default state of man is misery. Nature yields only mud, flies, rain, and shit to nourish us. Every good thing is a miracle, and every successful person defied the odds. The people who are successful all say, I did it, and you can do it too. And they are half right. If you're an above average person, you can, through tenacity and great personal sacrifice, become successful no matter what conditions surround you. To the people who say you'd have to pull off a miracle in order to be successful, the world is shit, they're also correct, and those who are successful ought to have sympathy for the plight of the not yet miraculous. There are many things in this world which are broken and could be better, and good people fight to make them better, and it will always be a fight. The moment you stop fighting, everything starts to revert to the state of nature, which I remind you is mud, flies, rain, and misery. If you want anything other than those four things, you have to fight. Knowing the world is unfair, knowing that everything is stacked against you, knowing that until you make it, everything is going to be awful, and that after you make it, your position is precarious. Even in a perfect world, this would be true. Suppose we got everything we asked for policy-wise. Mass deportation of every person of non-European heritage, radical disempowerment of and mandatory weight ceilings for women, all homeless people rendered into biodiesel. Even then, your life would still be a constant struggle against everyone else. The rewards would be more rewarding, but the competition would be as brutal as ever, and you would find more things to complain about. This was my big realization when Piquignones started talking about guys living in Ancapistan in their heads. It occurred to me, the realization dawned on me, that temperamentally, all of these ANCAP guys, were they to suddenly wake up tomorrow in Ancapistan, they wouldn't be happy. They'd have some new thing that they'd be yelling about. They'd become communists. Oh, these evil private defense corporations, they're screwing us all over. Whatever. They come up because temperamentally, they just wanted someone to bitch at. And they'd come up with some sort of philosophical justification for that. But at their base, they just wanted someone to bitch at. This is why I stopped the Stop Being Poor campaign, which I suspect that if I was to start doing that now, I'd probably get death threats in my mentions. So maybe I won't do that. But I'll just let you guys know that I thought about doing it. Boomers had it much easier than millennials. Millennials probably had it easier than Zoomers. But young people always have less than older people because older people have had much longer to accumulate wealth. You wouldn't want to live in a world where that wasn't true. Fighting for your life and winning should mean you have more than people who have not yet fought. The natural and normal thing for most young people is to feel, for most young people to feel is that the world isn't fair and that the odds of winning are low. That feeling is correct, but in no way does it relieve you of your obligation to fight. And I can hear the protests. Well, the world isn't fair, sure, but then there's all these other things that make it extra not fair. I don't give a shit. Those are part of the terrain. It's like you're getting a video game and you're going to start playing the video game. You're like, oh, they made this game. They made it just levels too hard, or this boss is too difficult to battle, or something. Like, it is what it is. It's fine to have a conversation about whose fault it is if you want to try to like wrap your mind around the issue or something. But the holding people accountable for the bad thing only happens after you overcome the bad thing. By definition, you cannot hold the people accountable before you've overcome it. Because to hold them accountable, you need power. And to get that power, you have to overcome the bad thing. Doesn't matter why the world isn't fair. Every generation has had their reasons for why the world isn't fair. If you want to hold people accountable for it not being fair, your task is to attain power. And you don't get that by yelling at people about it not being fair. Next one, Raig Nationalist. When I finished my PhD at Oxford, I worked briefly as a chef at a fairly upmarket hipster diner. I didn't want to be an academic writing about medieval saints' cults, but even so, it was an enormous, pretty surreal come down from life in the dreaming spires. It made me absolutely determined not to waste my time or my abilities. It was a valuable experience. I actually did manage to pull myself up by my bootstraps and create something that's totally my own with no help or family connections, purely on the basis of hard work and I suppose a measure of talent. I understand the bootstraps discourse. It's true. The truly talented and determined will be successful, or they'll perish and they won't resent perishing because they know the struggle and the risk are integral to the enterprise. You have to roll the dice to play. It's also a strange thing for the right, which valorizes the past and the tremendous virtues of our ancestors and the hardships they overcame, to complain about hardships in the present, as if our forebears didn't have it much, much worse. We can argue about how they had it different and whether material hardships and facing down cave bears and mass ranks of pike are worse than the largely spiritual hardships we face today. Even so, it's stupid and counterproductive to tell young men to accept decline and be satisfied with it. The tremendous decline in living standards and expectations is not, as Vivek Ramaswamy would have us believe, the product of paying too much attention to Zack and Slater and not being more like Screech. Not being more like Screech. Americans haven't renounced their birthright. The future has been stolen. Decline has been forced on Americans by the people who have flooded the country with illegal immigrants and opioids and allowed native manufacturing and industry to be packed up and shipped abroad. Young people should be angry. They should be livid. And what do you do with that anger? Yes, you should be livid. It's justified to be angry about the unjustness of this situation. But what do you do about it? You have to build an arc. You have to channel that anger as all of our great heroes, the stories, the great narratives we tell about our heroes who were angry about something, and they channeled that anger into dominating, into overcoming against all odds. Having generational dick measuring contests about who had it worse and who had it better is such a fucking waste of time. And if you're just like drinking some beers with your bros or whatever and you want to like debate, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about this relentless, obsessive, month after month, year after year, constantly belaboring though this group did this and that group and these generations did this and they had this thing and we don't get that and this is, you sound like fucking Marxists, man. Go build some shit. We need it. We don't have the time to waste on all of these fart noises. We've got a lot of shit to build. We're behind the eight ball. We don't have a civilization. We don't have the luxury of sitting around arguing about who's responsible for the decline of our civilization. We can do that after we build our civilization. That'll be something for the history books. We'll pick the historians who write the proper history after we've overcome. After we win. Patrick Casey. Regarding the life prospects debate, in my view, the challenge is striking a balance between A, recognizing that younger generations have been dealt a bad hand, and B, encouraging young people not to give up. We all want things to be better. That's what we're fighting for. But until then, self-victimization, telling yourself that you can't succeed due to external circumstances, just isn't the answer. I'm not accusing all or even most young people righteously voicing their grievances on here of this, but it is an easy trap to fall into and a hard trap from which to escape. And this self-victimization is a key part of this vengeful son spirit. And giving in to the vengeful son is losing. Let me say that again. Giving in to the vengeful son and embodying that spirit is losing. That's the definition of losing. Because the spirit of the vengeful son is the spirit of the devouring mother. It's updating itself for a new generation. But it's still playing on resentment. You, as a young person, shouldn't settle for menial work, nor should you pretend that everything is fine. You should be indignant. But that indignation must embolden you to overcome the unique and numerous obstacles that stand between you and the life you desire. This is the synthesis between A and B. And I'll say this, as a young person, you very well may need to settle for menial work. Like by definition, if that's the only thing that's available to you, by definition need to settle for that. That doesn't mean that it's good or just or fair or right. It just is. But menial work is not spiritually degrading. If you think menial work is spiritually degrading, you can't be pissed off at Jared Taylor for saying demeaning things about West Virginians, because you're doing the same fucking thing. You are the egghead in an ivory castle. Lomez. Again, I know there's a lot of people out there who don't like these guys. I do not give a flying fuck. I care about what they're saying, and what they're saying is exactly right. He says, Zoomers are the first cohort to be fully immersed in the reality of generational downward mobility. While millennials will also earn less than their parents, they were formed under the expectations of America ascending to a kind of post-history stasis, where at worst their status and wealth was permanently locked in. Zoomers have none of these illusions and rightfully reject the obsolete and facile narratives they're expected to swallow and obey to make sense of their lives and ambitions. Those are dead narratives. They do not reflect reality at all. They do not reflect the deranged cultural and political circumstances they're expected to navigate from a position of negative expected value for pretty much any career path outside of genius tech outlier. Scolding them is a stupid and pointless exercise that will only drive them further into despair and resentment. Yes, don't be resentful. Don't give in to despair. Be resourceful and lay a claim on your own life. But it's also going to require offering Zoomers much better and updated narratives and opportunities for how to accrue status and wealth and the basic conditions for living a dignified life for the average guy who is not an outlier tech genius. And this responsibility here, this responsibility to offer Zoomers a better and updated narrative and opportunity, this does not fall to the people who have failed us to this point. It's not Chris Rufo's responsibility to do this. It's the responsibility of all the people who are yelling at Chris Rufo to do this. Because Chris Rufo has demonstrated he's not going to do this. I see a whole lot of yelling about who's going to provide me a job. And not nearly enough, people are not going to like this, not nearly enough about how many jobs you're going to provide. How many of these white boys that you care about so much are you going to hire? Yeah, Chris Rufo didn't. That's right, he didn't. Are you going to be like him? Or are you not even going to get there in the first place? Are you just going to yell about this? I haven't hired any white boys, but I'm trying to put myself in a position where I can. Because nobody's coming to save us. We're the ones who have to do it for ourselves. And you can live a dignified life. If you're an average guy who's not an outlier tech genius, you can live a dignified life by working a menial job. We love our grugs. Some guys just need to work menial jobs. That doesn't mean they need to do it forever, but there may be a point in your life where you just got to work a menial job. And maybe it's someone else's fault. Maybe somebody did you wrong. Maybe you got screwed over, whatever. The fact is you are where you are, and you are responsible for getting yourself out of where you are, which is the most empowering message imaginable. You don't have to wait on someone else to do it for you. You have within yourself the capacity to do it for yourself. There are short, medium, and long-term fixes for this, some straightforwardly political, some more complex cultural questions. But the implicit promise of Boomer America, even Gen X America, is no longer viable. And that broken promise has absolutely nothing to do with Zoomers themselves. And I'll add on to this, it may have nothing to do with Zoomers themselves, but it will be up to the Zoomers to solve the problem themselves. That's the mindset that the Zoomers have to have. That's the mindset the millennials have to have. Lots of people contributed to us getting to where we are. But we're the only ones who are going to be able to get ourselves out of it. As Zero HP said, if you snapped your fingers and you magically gave us exactly all the things that we want, removed all the barriers and hurdles that have been artificially constructed in our way, there would still be a bunch of barriers and hurdles constructed in our way. And if you've primed yourself for the activity of sitting there complaining that everything is rigged against you and not honing your ability to overcome the rigging against you, then you're not going to be positioned to take advantage of those opportunities when they come. And I'm here to tell you that there are great opportunities coming. The next 5 to 10 years are going to make massive fortunes for many of our guys. The only question is whether you're going to be able to jump on board with that, or if you're going to be stuck yelling at Chris Rufo because he's insufficiently based. Speaking of our guys who are making something of themselves, check out Isaiah Taylor. You guys have been listening to the show for several months, then you can, you're aware of the Gundo Boys. If you're not aware of the Gundo Boys, you need to pay attention to the Gundo Boys. Isaiah Taylor is the founder of Valor Atomics, making nuclear reactors which generate clean, low-cost hydrocarbon fuels. He says, great write-up this morning in Infinite Frontiers. We dug deep on why it makes sense to make gas without oil using nuclear reactors. So here's the article. And again, the links to this will be in the podcast description if you're listening on the audio version, or go to the King Pilled Substack, and you can get all these links. Making hydrocarbon fuels from nuclear energy with Valor Atomics' Isaiah Taylor. Isaiah Taylor is the founder of Valor Atomics, an atomic energy company focused on mass manufacturing nuclear fission reactors. What is Valor Atomics? We mass manufacture nuclear reactors. Instead of producing electricity, these reactors split water into hydrogen and oxygen. We will then use the hydrogen combined with captured CO2 to produce hydrocarbon fuels like jet fuel, diesel, gasoline, and natural gas. We believe we can sell these carbon-neutral hydrocarbon fuels into the existing oil and gas marketplace at a lower cost than refining oil, even without carbon subsidies. It's a completely carbon-neutral solution to oil and gas. By adding nuclear energy as the energy source, we believe we can compete with oil and gas on price and dominate the hydrocarbon market with our synthetic carbon-neutral fuels. This is, I think he's like 23 or 24 maybe. And the name, Valor Atomics, that should give you a little clue what part of the world they're from. The Lord of the Rings named tech company. How did you come to found Valor Atomics? My great-grandfather was a nuclear physicist involved in the Manhattan Project. Atomic energy has been in my blood and something I've always thought about, and I founded Valor due to frustration with the existing nuclear industry. It turns out that not many companies make money from nuclear energy, but I believe successful technologies must be commercialized to generate significant profits. The nuclear industry has gotten stuck. It's become expensive and slow. I think the reason for that is because it's been so tightly coupled with electricity production. The contrarian position that led me to found Valor is that we should find a product of nuclear that is not necessarily sold to the grid, but sold into a global open market. For us, that product is hydrocarbons. Why hasn't this approach of using nuclear reactors to produce carbon-neutral hydrocarbon fuels been done before, and why is now the right time? Answer. It took me about 6 years of thinking, nights, and weekends of research to arrive at this conclusion. It's very counterintuitive and challenges a lot of assumptions. You have to believe in a unique set of things to pursue this as a business. Now imagine if he'd spent that 6 years, I don't know, reading Evola or Yarvin or whatever. And he probably did. Because a lot of these guys, they're very familiar with that world. But they're doing shit, man. They're actually out in the world doing shit. First, you have to believe that hydrocarbons are a great carrier of energy. The best way for humanity to move power around the world. They are truly the best means for transporting energy itself, not just a product we extract from the ground. Secondly, you have to conclude that nuclear energy could be much cheaper than it currently is. Some people have reached this conclusion, but I don't think anyone fully understands how much cheaper nuclear energy could be or why it has become so expensive. It took me years of research, reading, writing spreadsheets, and tedious work to gain certainty about the genuine potential for low-cost energy from nuclear reactors and what is causing the high expenses. Then you have to couple these two viewpoints, that nuclear energy can be significantly cheaper if built differently with hydrocarbons as the main product, and that hydrocarbons are the ideal way to transport energy globally, together. Both are contrarian viewpoints, not often held by the same person, but we have combined these interesting core beliefs at Valor. Can you explain the type of reactor design you're using for this approach and how it differs from other reactor designs? Answer. They will look quite similar to other reactors that have been built in the past. We're building a high-temperature gas-cooled reactor. The Chicago Pile 2 was a gas-cooled graphite-moderated reactor, and the first reactors that started producing power were gas-cooled. So this is sort of the OG reactor architecture. The industry has since moved on to light water-cooled reactors, and there are a lot of upsides and downsides to that approach. In general, I think the downsides have overtaken the upsides for various reasons. That's why we're reaching further back into the past for this architecture. The nice thing about our reactor is that it has built-in safety features and can reach higher temperatures, which means high efficiency. The downside is that it's slightly less power dense than light water reactors, meaning that your machine per unit of power ends up being larger, which adds to theoretical costs. On the other hand, I think it reduces practical costs. People like pursuing these extremely high power density reactor concepts because it makes the construction costs look lower on paper. However, there's a difference between theoretical construction costs, which are chemistry and materials, and practical construction costs, which are whether you can actually build it safely and efficiently. I'm so frickin' white-pilled, man. Every time that I look at these Gundo dudes, I am put to shame. They are the best of us. Gas-cooled reactors and synthetic fuels have been around for decades. Is Valar's innovation primarily around manufacturing and revenue model? Answer. We're not doing anything here that hasn't been done before, but we're tying together systems that have never been combined. Our society makes synthetic fuels, produces hydrogen from water, and has nuclear reactors. But no one has integrated all three of those into a scalable supply chain that is self-operated. The most important thing about Valar is that we operate our own systems. We're a jet fuel company and an oil and gas company. When we sell our oil and gas, we're selling a product that we produce through our own technology stack. Think of it as a refinery, but one that doesn't need to buy oil. We have a fundamental cost advantage in the oil and gas market because we make our own nuclear reactors and only need to purchase water, which costs less than purchasing crude oil. Nobody is tying all those machines together, manufacturing them on a production line, and then operating them. That's our advantage here. Is it going to be hard? It's going to be unbelievably difficult. I would say this is probably the most exciting engineering challenge of any company in the world today. We're building 3 extremely difficult technical systems. Nuclear reactors are hard, but we're designing one and building it from scratch. We're creating supply chains where they don't exist for the parts we need. We're building a lot in-house vertically. We're building a hydrogen generation system using thermal heat, which very few people in the world know how to do. Luckily, we've hired a team that knows how to do it and is one of the only teams that has ever done it before. On the hydrocarbon production side, this is somewhat novel, happening in just the last 10 to 20 years or so. It's going to be incredibly hard, but it's also going to be incredibly exciting. If we're able to crack it, we've cracked a multi-trillion-dollar market. What's the case for making more hydrocarbons rather than just figuring out how to make it cheaper to generate electricity with nuclear? Answer. Hydrocarbons are completely misunderstood in our society, and we radically underestimate the impact they've had on humanity. We would not be where we are today without hydrocarbons in almost every aspect of life. No matter where you look, you will see hydrocarbons all around you. The whiteboard, the mat for my mouse, the materials surrounding us are made of hydrocarbons. The paint on the wall contains hydrocarbons. Our entire modern world is made of hydrocarbons. Beyond just physical materials, energy itself is a secret thing underlying all human society, and we often overlook its importance. It's the only way we move around the world. Every time you get in your car, go to work, visit a friend, or go to a coffee shop, you're consuming something finite in the universe. The time of human beings whose lives contribute to the production of energy and entropy. In many ways, the availability of energy is one of the primary limiting factors for mankind. Hydrocarbons have been the only way we have done this at scale as a species for the last 200 years. Before oil and gas, it was coal, and before that, other hydrocarbon fuels like peat. It's almost ridiculous to consider a world without hydrocarbons, at least until this point. Should we move away from hydrocarbons? You can make that argument, but to start the conversation, we must acknowledge that modern civilization exists in large part thanks to hydrocarbons. It simply would not have happened without abundant and available hydrocarbons. I'm very grateful to the oil and gas industry over the last few hundred years, as it is hard to think of another industry that has had a greater positive impact on mankind. That said, where are we now? Are we ready to move away from hydrocarbons? I would still say no, we're nowhere near ready, nor should we be, because hydrocarbons are still the best way we know to move energy around the world. Not many people understand this, but energy does not move around the world via electricity. It moves via hydrocarbons. If you want to move energy between two nations or states, it's much more likely that it's moving through a pipeline with oil and gas than through an electrical cable. The reason for this is that it's much more expensive to create electrical infrastructure than hydrocarbon infrastructure. If you want to move a lot of energy, a ship is the only way we have as a society to do that. We don't have electrical cables stretching across oceans, and if we did, it would be massively expensive and difficult to maintain. On the other hand, hydrocarbons carry so much energy for their size, making them incredibly easy to move around the world. Eventually, I do think we will change where these hydrocarbons come from. I think in the future, they will no longer come out of the ground. Instead, we'll treat them as a renewable way to move energy around and as a mobile fuel for aircraft, diesel trucks, and the like. It's a contrarian viewpoint on hydrocarbons. I don't think we stop using them, but I think we change where they come from. I think they will come from the air, the atmosphere, as a cyclic vehicle for producing and consuming hydrocarbons. Is the end state of Valar a closed-loop system? Answer, absolutely. Frankly, the only long-term plan that actually works for Valar is to pull carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. In the short term, we can get CO2 from various places, but if we want to produce a vast majority of fuels on Earth, which we do, we're going to have to pull it out of the air. That's the only sustainable way to get carbon at a massive scale. It's a total cycle because the outputs of burning a hydrocarbon are CO2 and water. Those are the same two inputs we use to produce a hydrocarbon. You can think of Valar atomics as reversing combustion. You put gas in your car and it combusts with oxygen in the atmosphere, giving you heat and energy. We take those outputs and rewind combustion, reversing it back into the hydrocarbon. We release the oxygen back into the atmosphere and then resell the hydrocarbon to be used in combustion again. So your proposal is essentially to turn what are now seen as non-renewable energy resources into renewable resources? Answer: yes, it's highly counterintuitive. You have to see hydrocarbons not as a fixed resource underground, but rather as a medium for transporting energy that you can create in one place and use in another. When you use it, it goes back into the atmosphere and you can create it again. It's a cycle. People just don't imagine hydrocarbons behaving that way. You have to believe that the missing piece is just energy content. And then you have to believe that this energy content could come cheaply from nuclear reactors. You have to believe nuclear reactors can be cheap if you couple these systems because of the way the sites work and how we build them. You have to believe that we can make it very affordable. I think you'll see people gravitating in this direction over the next few years, but nobody in the world has as much conviction about this as I do and is willing to move as fast as I am to pursue it. I believe that Valar atomics will be uncontested. How does the world look different if Valar is successful? Energy would be a lot cheaper. I think that an energy-rich society is a much more beautiful society, as things that are optimized for energy costs are not optimized for beauty and for things that humans care about. We kind of saw that since the 1970s in the US with the oil crisis, which slowly evolved into a general energy cost crisis. The price of energy was dropping up until 1970, and it has stagnated since then. At the same time, I think we've seen a lot of our civil life become less beautiful. Who does he sound like here? Something about mimetic models. Shout out to Jason Miranchuk. For example, cars have become more of a function of energy cost and consumption, which has informed the shape and properties. I believe today's cars are far less beautiful than their predecessors because back then we weren't thinking as much about fuel consumption and energy consumption. I think we will make it easier for mankind to move around the world. You'd be able to get from New York to California for around $100 because the jet fuel from our reactors is so cheap. I also think space exploration will be massively enabled. SpaceX is continuing to produce rockets that burn hydrocarbon fuels to take us not only around the world, but to the moon and Mars. We've found a way to make the fuel for that process extremely cheap. This makes life on Mars and other planets much more feasible because we figured out a way to generate fuels wherever we have access to CO2 and water, which is most places, as long as we have our Valar reactors with us. And Bryce said, this sounds like dark tech type stuff. Well, deep tech newsletter. This is what I'm telling you guys, man. These Gundo boys, we got to keep an eye on them. This is the overlap between Silicon Valley, the entrepreneurial Silicon Valley spirit, embodied in guys like these Gundo boys, and people like Pace Morby. He's not from Silicon Valley, but he's similar to this entrepreneurial type. Alex Hormozy. Their mentality, everyone likes to poo-poo them and the stupid entrepreneur, blah, blah, blah. Because they're kind of like politically normy. They're sort of politically ambivalent. They're like, I don't really care what the political system is because I'm fully obsessed with my vision. I'm fully obsessed with the thing that I'm building. And I don't really care what sort of obstacles you put in front of me. I'm a machine that overcomes obstacles. I turn obstacles into capital. So if you want to give me more obstacles, you're just going to enhance my capital base. We need a mashup of that spirit with the political awareness and the sense of what time it is that is present right now on right-wing Twitter. But right-wing Twitter is too given to theory selling, and these guys are too politically ambivalent. Given a choice between the two, frankly, I take the politically ambivalent guys because they're going to build something. But the time for theory selling is over. It's behind us. The theories have been run to death. Our solutions may come through politics, but they're not in politics. We have a civilization to build. We should have been building it a long time ago. We're way behind. These guys are ahead of us in the civilizational building project. But there's so much more to be done. And we're so lucky, on the day that one drops, this one drops. From Mother Jones, of all people. Colin Ross says, like asking Nikola Tesla who he voted for. There's a banger. That's a good one. So this is Isaiah Taylor again. He says, Mother Jones from the top rung with an incredible exposition of the Christian philosophy of wealth. Awesome. Time to go build 1,000 nuclear reactors. So here's the article. I'm going to read it to you guys. The ultra-Christian tech bros have been mingling at Mar-a-Lago. These Gen Z entrepreneurs bring a militant version of Christianity to Trump's inner circles. Last Thursday, as wildfires continued to blaze through Los Angeles, firefighters appeared to be no match for the deadly combination of winds and flames. But one entrepreneur in the LA suburb of El Segundo had an idea. Augustus DeRico, a 24-year-old who runs a geoengineering startup called Rainmaker, announced on X his intention to help. Rainmaker will do what it can, he posted, starting Saturday. DeRico may not be a tech celebrity like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, but he isn't a nobody either, at least not anymore. Just 4 years ago, DeRico was a lowly undergrad conservative activist at the University of California, Berkeley, where he launched the school's chapter of America First Students, the university arm of the political organization founded by white nationalist Groyper and Holocaust denier Nick Fuentes. But for DeRico, as for many young aspiring tech entrepreneurs, a college degree was not a prerequisite for success. Last year, PayPal founder Peter Thiel, there you go, that's the reference I was making a minute ago. I wasn't talking about Tucker, although Tucker is, there's some overlap there. These are Peter Thiel boys. These are the boys who are modeling themselves after Thiel and Musk. Last year, PayPal founder Peter Thiel's foundation granted DeRico a Thiel Fellowship, a grant awarded annually to a select group of entrepreneurs who have foregone a college degree in order to pursue a tech-focused business venture. In DeRico's case, that venture was Rainmaker, which seeks to increase the U.S. water supply through cloud seeding technology. Like many tech entrepreneurs, DeRico believes his work is the solution to an urgent problem. Cloud seeding is a necessary technology to avert worsening drought, he posted recently. But he also believes his work manifests God's will. In August, he told his followers on X, quote, "One of our Lord's first commandments was to subdue the earth and tend to it. He desires that mankind control the weather for the sake of building the kingdom of God on earth and stewarding it well." End quote. In another post, he wrote, "Dams modify rivers. Jesus was a carpenter who modified forests, cut trees, to build houses. We aim to serve God." Cloud seeding is just the next step in the evolution of man's relationship with nature for the greater glory of the divine. DeRico didn't say exactly how he and his few dozen employees plan to help with the fires, but the practical details seem to be beside the point, at least to his admiring followers on social media who responded to his post. Augustus promises to do what he can to stop the bleeding, enthused one fan on X. He plans to command the heavens and make the angels cry for life to prevail. Another added, "Godspeed, brethren, may the good Lord bless you and keep you." DeRico is just one example within a rising tide of American Christianity that appears to be cresting in California's tech enclaves. Recent news stories have described a new generation of tech bros flocking to church in the famously secular San Francisco Bay Area and Silicon Valley, discovering Christianity through PayPal founder and billionaire investor Peter Thiel, and investing in a Christ-centered real estate enclave in rural Kentucky. There are the usual reasons for this surging interest in Christianity, like yearning for community and searching for the greater meaning of life. And for those immersed in a tech culture that has long been obsessed with longevity, the promise of eternal life must offer a special appeal. But there are other forces at play which revolve around a very specific kind of Christianity, that of the Theo Bros. Now this term, let me open this real quick and see. I've never actually heard this term used before. What is this a reference to? Oh, interesting. I didn't see this before. Another Mother Jones article. To understand J.D. Vance, you need to meet the Theo Bros. These extremely online young Christian men want to end the 19th Amendment, restore public flogging, and make America white again. Oh, man. Okay, I'm going to pull that one off for future reading. Okay. But there are other forces at play which revolve around a very specific kind of Christianity, that of the Theo Bros, a group of mostly millennial and Gen Z ultra-conservative men, many of whom proudly call themselves Christian nationalists. Among the tenets of this branch of Protestant Christianity, known as Reform or Reconstructionist, is the idea that the United States should be subject to biblical law. While the Theo Bros' beliefs are extreme, many of them think women shouldn't be able to vote and that the Constitution has outlived its usefulness and we should instead be governed by the Ten Commandments. Their movement is moving out of the fringe, in part because they are very savvy about broadcasting it on a multitude of platforms, on podcasts and YouTube shows, on X, at a seemingly never-ending round-robin of conferences. Dorico attends a church that is part of the Theo Bros denomination in an LA suburb, as do others in his El Segundo tech community and beyond. The Theo Bros also have made inroads to the upper reaches of political power. In November, President-elect Trump nominated one of their allies, former Fox News commentator Pete Hegseth, to lead the Department of Defense. Hegseth attends a church in Tennessee that is affiliated with the Theo Bro movement, and his children attend a school affiliated with the network of classical Christian schools that Wilson helped found. J.D. Vance has brushed shoulders with the Theo Bros, too. He spoke at last summer's National Conservatism Conference, where Wilson also spoke. This is Doug Wilson. I don't know why it's just saying Wilson, because it hasn't actually introduced him. And he co-founded the Rockbridge Network, a powerful group of Republican donors, with Chris Buskirk, a board member of the unofficial Theo Bro magazine, American Reformer. The Theo Bros' burgeoning connections with the Trump administration mark a divergence from the style of Christianity that the MAGA world had once embraced. During Trump's first term, he forged connections with leaders in what's known as the New Apostolic Reformation, a charismatic movement whose adherents believe that Christians are called to take over the government. Those leaders went on to become instrumental figures in the Stop the Steal campaign that led to the Capitol insurrection of 2021. Yet the Theo Bros are, for the most part, much more militant in their political and social beliefs than the New Apostolic Reformation adherents. Recent pieces in American Reformer have bemoaned the feminization of Christianity, lambasted the willfully childless feminists in the media, and predicted that, quote, traditional American holidays that reflect our Christian and Anglo heritage will become battlegrounds in the contest over the soul of America among the disparate groups now populating the country. Theo Bros are also more tech and media savvy than many of their New Apostolic Reformation counterparts. As Rachel Tabachnik, an extremism researcher who has been studying Christian nationalism for decades, told me when I interviewed her for a piece on the Theo Bros last year, quote, they are going to be free to be entrepreneurs in all different senses, including the tech world that they're mixing with so freely. With the prominence of figures like Elon Musk and Peter Thiel, the tech industry has gained a greater profile in Trump world, and so too are the links between the Trump administration and the Theo Bro universe deepening. Shortly before Christmas, Trump's Mar-a-Lago Club hosted a group of tech investors for a luncheon of butternut squash soup, roasted cod, and Trump chocolate cake. Double chocolate cake, dark chocolate glaze, vanilla ice cream for dessert. Among the firms represented was 1789 Capital, the firm that Donald Trump Jr. joined in November. 1789 Capital's founder is American Reformer's Buskirk. Another attendee was a 24-year-old entrepreneur named Isaiah Taylor, a friend of Rainmaker's Dorico. Taylor runs a startup he founded in 2023 called Valor Atomics, which says it is, quote, scaling nuclear energy for heavy industrial power and clean hydrocarbon fuel production. He, too, currently lives in El Segundo, but he is originally from Moscow, Idaho, which in 2023 he described on X as, quote, a silly little town in northern Idaho, population 20K. He lived there, he wrote, in order to be part of a medium-sized church community, specifically Christ Church, the Reformed evangelical church founded by Wilson, the Theo Bro patriarch. Today, with Dorico as a fellow worshiper, Taylor attends Christ Church Santa Clarita, a Southern California member church in the denomination that Wilson founded. Now, if he is living in El Segundo and this church is in Santa Clarita, that's a hike. I don't know if it's actually in Santa Clarita. I'd imagine it is if it's called Christ Church Santa Clarita. And I don't know for sure if he actually lives in El Segundo or he just works there. But if he's actually attending church in Santa Clarita and he lives in El Segundo, that's like probably an hour plus hour and a half drive, somewhere in there, depending on traffic. In 2023, Taylor wrote on X that Wilson had been, quote, a huge influence on me regarding wealth. Wilson has written that he sees technology as something like a divine gift. Quote, if you have a smartphone, you have more wealth in your pocket than Nebuchadnezzar accumulated over the course of his lifetime, he wrote in his 2020 book, Productivity, A Practical Theology of Work and Wealth. We have a responsibility to turn a profit on these astounding resources. In keeping with that philosophy, Taylor told The Information's Julia Black in December that he saw his company's mission as spiritual in nature. I think God created a world full of abundant energy and we have to unlock it, he explained. On X, he put it differently. I'm a Christian environmentalist, he posted in 2023. I believe that the world is a gift from God, which we must tend and care for like a garden. So naturally, I want to reindustrialize the United States and build 1,000 nuclear reactors. The hypermasculine aesthetics of Theo Bros would seem to fit right into the El Segundo tech scene, the overwhelmingly male members of which refer to themselves as GUNDO Bros. In an article last February, Forbes' David Jeans and Sarah Emerson described guys in defense tech startups who, quote, pump iron while they code, host weekly bonfires on the beach, and shotgun energy drinks. Vanity Fair's Zoe Bernard observed the Gundo Bros, quote, outsized respect for their country and men in uniform. They love fast cars, tobacco products, and their Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. The Gundo Bros have a way of casually mixing the realms of tech, masculinity, and Christianity. Quote, El Segundo is where you can try to end scarcity, reverse engineer meteorological RF equipment, machinate about geopolitical GDM strategy, eat milk and steak for lunch, scheme with cracked engineers, squat a 5x5 of back squats with a disgusting amount of ammonia, and praise God, posted Dorico last year. In another post, he mused, the physiques at Gold's are markedly better after church hours on Sunday. Angelically sanctioned anabolism. Many of the Gundo Bros have benefited from the largesse of tech investor Mark Andreessen, a major Trump supporter, friends with Elon Musk and Peter Thiel, and close advisor to Trump's newly convened Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE. Quote, big tech spent a decade doing everything possible to be the best conceivable progressive ally, Andreessen posted on X in November. They got treated with utter contempt, pounded daily, crucified in return. A full rethinking is required, end quote. To that end, through his firm Andreessen Horowitz, he started a $500 million fund for tech companies, several of which have headquarters in El Segundo, which are, quote, solving our country's most vexing challenges. Andreessen has Theo Bro connections, too. Last month, Forbes reported that Andreessen-backed New Founding, an investment firm that aims to build a conservative Christian community and real estate empire in rural Appalachia. Andreessen didn't respond to emailed questions from Mother Jones. Another powerful force in the El Segundo scene is Discipulus Ventures, an accelerator program funded in part by Andreessen Horowitz that says it seeks to build, quote, a network of the smartest, most contrarian individuals whose aspirations to change the world have been overlooked by their respective universities and companies, end quote. Discipulus's guiding principles are religion, patriotism, and family. Its participants must have, quote, a strict devotion to truth and goodness. The cohort of 10 entrepreneurs starts each day with a 6 a.m. workout. Then the participants learned from more seasoned entrepreneurs. Mentors include Rainmakers Dorico and Catherine Boyle, a general partner at Andreessen's firm. It doesn't look like Dorico's company was able to make much progress against the fires over the past few days. The only evidence on X is a single post on Friday by a Rainmaker engineer showing a photo of some people holding a large white balloon attached to a spool of what looks like kite string. Dorico didn't respond to Mother Jones' request for comment for this piece, but he and his friends are aiming higher anyway. In October, he reposted an X post from Valor Atomics' Isaiah Taylor. Quote, I don't think most hard tech investors even have the right categories, Taylor wrote. This is the real game. Who gets to own space logistics? Who gets to own the weather? Who gets to own energy? Think bigger. Meanwhile, the Theo Bros mingling with MAGA elites is likely just getting started. This week, just a few days before Trump's inauguration, Valor Atomics' Taylor, who also didn't respond to a request for comment, is scheduled to return to Mar-a-Lago, this time to present at an event called Nuclear Energy Space and Defense Tech Investor Summit. I'll be speaking on nuclear energy and the Founding Fathers, he posted on X in early January. Come ready to restart America's energy engine. We're going to fix this thing. How can you possibly be blackpilled, man? Duffhead says, these are my guys. 100%. Just wait until the Gundo Bros start reading Seraphim Rose. That might happen. What we're looking at is the new military-industrial complex being built. And it's occupied by our guys. This stuff matters. This is the stuff that matters. The spirit that they have is so contagious. They have that thing that's characteristic to the Silicon Valley online entrepreneur world that is so off-putting to a lot of people because it seems fake to just be like relentlessly positive and optimistic. But it turns out, if you're relentlessly positive and optimistic, then you're constantly in the right frame of mind to make the most out of every situation that presents itself to you. We need more Gundo Bros. They're very easy to get a hold of too. All right, very last thing. I'm just gonna press on through here. This reading isn't that long, but it's topical, and I put it in the title, so I'm going to do it. This is from Scott Greer. FanDuel Americans. They aren't woke or particularly political, and America's future looks bright to them. He wrote this October 17th of 2024. Should Americans be optimistic about the future? Mike Cernovich seems to think so. Quote, I know it's the cool trend of conservatives to talk about how everything sucks, but I've never seen a time when more men train BJJ, gun sales are up, the young guys all want to start businesses. I'm long America, he posted on X last weekend. This probably isn't enough to convince the highly respected audience to be white-pilled. Highly respected is the name of his Substack we're reading from. But there are a lot of Americans who can feel positive about tomorrow, and they aren't leftists. This is a larger group than Cernovich's hypothetical demographic. They're not just guys doing a combination of Brazilian jiu-jitsu, owning tons of guns, and running their own business. They're often doing a lot less than that. What distinguishes this group is that they're young and not woke. They aren't reactionaries and don't desire a counter-revolution. They're even fine with many of the changes that characterize multicultural America. What they want is a country that allows them to earn a living and have plenty of amusements free of politics. They are FanDuel Americans, and they've got a lot to look forward to in the new America. The term barstool conservative has often been applied to this group, but it's not the best way to see them. That label was coined by writer Matthew Walter to bemoan the American right's increasing lack of interest in traditional social conservatism. It's an explicitly political orientation. FanDuel Americanism is much broader. It's a social and cultural mood that can impact politics, but its disposition is about deprioritizing politics. It's about distracting yourself from the problems of the world in a non-woke, bro-y way. One of the main outlets for that is FanDuel and other sports betting apps. Barstool is less of an outlet for this, and the site is too associated with Dave Portnoy's idiosyncratic politics and habits. The media enterprise is also a bit more bourgeois than what FanDuel Americanism represents. The cultural libertarianism of the FanDuel Americans includes many proletarian elements. I've tried to find a term to describe this particular cultural trend for a while. There are signs of it all around us. Country songs topping the Billboard charts, a movie celebrating Red State America becoming the biggest movie of the summer, sports leagues dropping mandatory pride gear, gun ownership going up, and other such things. This is less of a cultural backlash and more of a sidestepping of wokeness. With the exception of Jason Aldean's Try That in a Small Town, these elements are about depoliticizing culture. They don't attack woke, they just aren't woke. FanDuel Americans and Americanism is the best way to describe this phenomenon. America now offers plenty of ways to distract yourself free of politics. Individual choice has never been stronger and more sacrosanct. A person is allowed in America to legally buy weed, place a bet, get an abortion in most states, change their gender, marry whoever they want, watch whatever they want, do whatever they want to their body. There's an endless array of options of what to do with your time. You can play video games or watch porn all day and there's no one to stop you. Dating apps offer the appearance of unlimited choice of who you want to court and or sleep with. Individual choice reigns supreme in modern America. The only real limitations are on whether you can express bigoted views in public, but that's something policed by society rather than the government. To many right-wingers, this future looks like a nightmare. A nation of rootless, disconnected individuals, all merely striving to please themselves and make money, is not inspiring. This nation could never motivate its population to fight and die for its survival. There are no higher ideals or rooted traditions to bind people together. Why would people risk their lives for the state? They've got too many FanDuel parlays to worry about. FanDuel Americans also greatly disappoint the woke. They don't want to hear about gender theory. They don't want to check their white privilege. They don't want to protest for racial justice. And they certainly don't want to read the latest Ibram X. Kendi book. They just want to watch the game and amuse themselves. Anything that gets in the way of that agitates them. They see wokeness as a hindrance to fun and therefore oppose it. The difference between right-wingers and FanDuel Americans is that the latter don't pine for some lost golden age. They like the current era. They want fewer annoyances and more access to the distractions. There are many things that black pill right-wingers that don't upset FanDuel Americans. Eroding WASP norms and new ones that approve of visible tattoos and smoking weed in public. The FanDuel American doesn't know what a WASP is, doesn't mind tattoos, and smokes weed himself. Radically changing demographics that's making America less white. The FanDuel American doesn't care, brags about his black friends, and thinks diversity makes his favorite team better. Nobody going to church? The FanDuel American doesn't go either. Everyone wasting money on sports bets and OnlyFans? So does the FanDuel American. The FanDuel American has some conservative instincts. He likes the free market. He supports the troops. He stands for the national anthem. He doesn't list his pronouns. But this isn't what he truly cares about. He cares about distractions, and he strives to make enough money to pursue them. He likes the fact that there are now several get-rich-quick schemes that to have a chance at reaching this goal, whether through crypto or drop shipping. This demographic isn't that politically motivated, as politics aren't what define them, but Donald Trump is trying hard to win them over. He's gone on several bro-y podcasts to appeal to them and has championed the cause of crypto. He pitches himself as the fun candidate who will allow the FanDuel Americans to pursue their happiness and peace. Trump has at least made FanDuel Americans like him, but whether they'll actually turn up to vote is another matter. Young men aren't known for showing up on election day. Ha ha! Great to read that in retrospect. FanDuel Americans have a lot of reasons to feel optimistic about America's future. This country will offer them more of what they want while lacking nothing they care particularly about. America will still be a great place to focus on yourself and your own amusements. People could still tune out politics and be relatively happy. They might notice a different country, but will it bother them? I wouldn't bet on it. The FanDuel Americans, whether we like it or not, those are our guys. And we don't need them to stop being FanDuel Americans. They're the normies. We're always going to have the normies. Our responsibility is to take care of the normies, to advocate for them, to provide for them. But in order to do that, we have to be able to advocate for ourselves and provide for ourselves. And in many ways, the attitude that they have, the sort of politically ambivalent, just want to have a good time and bro out with my guys, that attitude is going to take them further than the relentless purity spiraling, doom fapping attitude that is characteristic of a large swath of the online right-wing commentariat, who look down their nose at the FanDuel Americans because they like smoke weed and they do all this degenerate stuff and they don't freak out every time they see a black guy and they think Israel's awesome and they'll fly an Israel flag and they're like, woo, yeah, greatest ally. We don't need them to be red-pilled. We don't need them to be politically activated. Them going and voting for Trump because he went on all the bro podcasts shows their utility to us as an ally in their current state. Those of us who know better, our responsibility is not to bludgeon them and castigate them for their degeneracy. Our job is to work for them, sacrifice for them, give them the life that they want to live. Make that possible for them. It's not for us. Because if you're going about all this just for yourself, just like in this self-serving way, I'm going to get the vengeance for what was done to me. I'll prove them wrong. You're gonna get pulled off into the weeds. These are our people who we have a responsibility to provide for. They've been harmed by all. They may not realize that the smoking weed and the getting the tattoos and watching porn and the sports ball, being obsessed with it and blowing all their money on betting on it. The way to rescue them from that isn't to yell at them about degeneracy or their political naivete. We have to present them a vision. We have to build something for them, call them to a higher purpose, inspire that desire for quests. They're our countrymen. The knowledge that we have about the state of the world places a burden on us. It's a responsibility for us that we have to embrace, become leaders, and lead the normies while appreciating them for being normies. All right, that's all I got, guys. There's a long one, but hopefully it was worthwhile. Do me a favor and hit the like button on your way out. And as a reminder, if you want to read any of these things or access these videos or anything like that, the place to go is the King Pilled Substack or any of the podcatchers. And do me a favor and subscribe to the King Pilled Substack. Leave a rating, 5-star rating and review on the podcatchers. Hit the like button here. Follow me on Twitter at RealKingPilled. And yeah, go join the King Pilled Discord. If you want to join a good group of people, you don't want to feel isolated, you feel kind of alone, you don't feel like you have people you can talk to or vent with. You just feel isolated or black-pilled by whatever's on the timeline. It's always a fun time. It's always popping in the King Pilled Discord. Duffhead says, stop being poor, join the Discord. We will welcome you in. You have to submit yourself to a penis inspection. We have a penis inspector. His responsibility is to determine the state of your foreskin, but you'll like it. I promise you. I guarantee it. Go to kingpill.com, sign up, join the Kingpill Discord, and I'll be back again tomorrow with another episode of the ASTROLABE. For now, I give you Hulk. Oh, wait. Miranchuk is live. Hold on. Let me throw a redirect in here. This stream, assuming that he's going to talk about the insurance situation, this stream, it's not letting me. Damn. All right. Well, it doesn't look like, let's see, Jason, let's see, Miranchuk. Let me see if it'll come up if I search for it. No, it's not showing up. Well, anyways, go over to Miranchuk now on YouTube or on X and follow him and go listen to what he has to say. He's much smarter than I am. Probably yells a little bit less. You'll enjoy it. For now, I give you Hulk.
When they took a shot at my hero, and they tried to kill the next president of the United States, enough